All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday night, and that means we have another nomination tournament for you all today. So for our first matchup, it is going to be Outer Region versus RTK Tim the Wilder. This is going to be our first semifinal of the day, and they are sitting ready, so we're going to get things rolling pretty quick. But the first matchup is going to be Outer Region, and he is going to be on Khorne. And then we have Tim the Wilder, who is going to be on Nurgle himself. So a matchup as old as time, one that we have seen many times over in this format. So we'll be getting that going here as everyone is nice and ready. And we get right into the action right off the bat. Kind of making sure everything is looking good on all fronts. So the first map is going to be on the Crossing the Sea of Claws. It's going to be a nice open map. Going to be probably a little bit of a detriment to Nurgle here, just considering the range between each of the objective points. We'll see if Tim the Wilder does have something up his sleeve, though, to kind of pull that off. So we will be switching that scene over in just a second as they load on in. Got a few things to kind of update, and hopefully... All right, looks like it's going. Had a little bit of a hiccup there loading in. Thought that we might see a bit of an issue on that front. Just update a couple things quick, and then you guys will be able to see. All right. So for the armies here today, we have Outer Region. He is going to be going with Khorne, and he does have the Herald of Khorne, and the Herald is going to be rolling in with, of course, his Hellblade, and just Revel in Slaughter, going to be the only item being brought. Gives a nice little buff to an AoE for them. We also do have some Chaos Warriors with dual weapons. We're actually going to be seeing quite a few of those, and we are actually going to be seeing a couple of Skull Cannons as well, looking to kind of bring the ranged fight to Nurgle. These guys can do some okay damage, so they do have a bit of an accuracy problem. Most of their targets are going to be likely the larger targets, which they'll be able to hit a lot better than the others. We also do have two Cultists of Khorne as well, with just the Gate Summon. Some of those Chaos Furies up in the sky, and they'll swing on over to what Tim the Wilder has, a little bit of a smaller army, but we are going to be seeing some Nurglings, some Plague Bearers as well. We do have looks like a couple of Cultists going to be bringing in the summons of their own, and we do have a Soul Grinder as well as an Exalted Great Unclean One. Pretty standard bringing that Exalted Clean. We'll see how well that Soul Grinder is going to be doing here. I'm going to be firing at range, as it is going to be trying taking some shots in from those Skull Cannons to boot. But for the Exalted Great Unclean One, we do have Blight Swarm, Stream of Corruption, Fleshy Abundance, and then of course it is going to be that Mortis Engine effect with that Pestilent Decay. But that is pretty much going to be the armies, as both sides going to be just kind of slowly bringing some things in. These Skull Cannons going to be ranging the battlefield, looking to get some nice shots in. Looking like they're going to be trying to target that Exalted Great Unclean One early on, but they do have a ton of HP to do it, but they will be able to get some nice poke damage early on, while the rest of the army stays nice and safe. Well, relatively safe anyways, as we do have, of course, that Soul Grinder, who is starting to fire some shots in to those Chaos Warriors up on the top, but taking pretty minimal damage so far, as those Skull Cannons continue to get some good shots in themselves, and they have a nice juicy large target, so it's going to be a lot harder to miss. Most of the time when they do fire against the infantry or anything a little bit smaller, it is going to be going just kind of right over their heads and isn't going to be getting the best of value, but we'll see how well they are going to be able to do. They do regenerate ammunition as well when they are in melee, so they'll be able to kind of go in and out of this engagement, try and just recuperate as much of that ammunition, so they should be able to have some use throughout the entire game, and with their speed they'll be able to kind of avoid anything that really Nurgle can bring to kind of try and chase them down. Though it looks like we do have some Plague Toads going to be kind of hopping their way on in, going to be at least trying to screen out these Skull Cannons just a little bit, while Khorne does get kind of set up on their own side around point 2, bringing in some spawn as well, just kind of just facing off against Nurgle. Now, of course, with that Exalted Great Unclean One, it's going to be a rather daunting task to kind of go headlong into that, and as such, Khorne has kind of moved to some of the outer reaches as well, as we have these Chaos Warriors on the far side. Now that these guys are going to be outnumbered on this flank and getting surrounded, probably it's going to mean that they will end up losing this engagement overall, but they do have the bonus versus infantry, so they'll probably be able to put up a rather formidable fight nonetheless. Those so the cultists with that summon, getting those rear charge penalties, should be able to try and break these before they do too much of that. But we swing on over back to the center ranks as those Chaos Fury kind of dive in against those Plague Toads of Nurgle, kind of keeping them at bay, kind of pushing them back away from those Skull Cannons as it continues to kind of fire away, taking off some nice good chunks from that Exalted Great Unclean One, as the shots, a few shots going to be landing amongst the debris on the field, blocking that big chungus from their shots, while that Soul Grinder as well is going to continue firing away, kind of just plucking off as many of these Chaos Warriors as they can, and they have taken them down to about half health, but in exchange has used up pretty much all of its ammunition, so really not a whole lot of value really generated from that Soul Grinder so far in this fight, while these Skull Cannons have actually probably generated quite a bit themselves, taking that Exalted Great Unclean One down to about half health, but of course it does have plenty of healing to boot as well, so we'll be able to probably top off no problem whatsoever. Nurgle is kind of bringing some of their own spawn, but the single entities of Khorne have actually rotated themselves around to this top point, as well as we have some Flesh Hounds as well going to be diving in with some spawn. So we're going to be looking to try and turn the tide of this engagement so far away from the rest of the Nurgle forces, and this is going to be a really good engagement for Khorne, considering how far away they are from any of the notable support that is that Exalted Great Unclean One. And in the meantime, while Khorne just kind of avoids that Exalted Great Unclean One, those Skull Cannons continue to do some really good work against them. Getting a summon of Bloodletters as well, just try and mow down as much of this infantry as possible while the Flesh Hounds do screen out that Soul Grinder, kind of keeping them at bay. They're just going to have some Plague Bearers and some spawn, which should have no problem dealing with those Flesh Hounds, but in the meantime, their infantry forces are taking a major beating, while these Bloodletters are going to be turning to try and give a little assistance to these Flesh Hounds, and engaging with those Plague Bearers will do some pretty decent work, but those spawn will be able to kind of put a bit of a damper on their parade. But the center engagement is now finally getting underway as the spawn of Khorne can be diving right on in. Now they don't have really any infantry support, so a little bit of probably an overextension here. Definitely want to have these Chaos Warriors engaged, even though they are kind of engaging with that Exalted Unclean One. You want to kind of minimize as many units that are engaged in close proximity, but spawns just do so terrible when they are not engaged with some kind of support themselves. And as you can see already, that Exalted Great Unclean One has been able to heal up, but with those flaming attacks from these Skull Cannons, that is able to mitigate the healing at least a little bit. But with how long it's going to take to bring that guy down, even reducing the healing that he's getting isn't going to be changing too much. He should be able to hit his healing cap no problem whatsoever. And that spawn, now Rampage, going to be kind of fighting out pretty much to the bitter end on their side. And back up onto the top bit for Khorne, looking like they're doing a pretty decent work. Most of the Plague Bearers are sitting very low, though just the overwhelming support on their side might be enough to kind of turn the tide in Nurgle's favor, and they might be able to, actually they will, at least for the time being, be able to hold this point. Some forces are kind of coming in for Khorne. We have some spawn and some more Flesh Hounds going to be kind of streaming their way on down, and with so far in this match, Nurgle does have points 2 and point 1, so they are getting a nice bit of lead with some additional support for Forsaken all coming in, and it looks like some Nurglings as well trying to just throw some more bodies at this point, as Khorne does try, and they do eventually get enough weight onto this point to start kind of taking it back, as they are holding Nurgle to the very outside edge, but things are kind of getting really beat down on all fronts. There, we'll swing back over to see how things are doing on the center point, and yeah, that spawn, as kind of expected, do fall to all of those units. Not really doing all too great on that, but Khorne has pretty much abandoned that center point, just kind of sending those units there as mostly a delay, and are holding that big chunkus there, and really he doesn't even want to kind of move up here because that'll put him so far out of position for the rest of the map, and Nurgle just continues to just stream in more and more bodies towards point 1. We have Forsaken, more Nurglings all coming in, just trying to just bog down this point for as long as they can, but Khorne is also coming in with quite a few units of their own. Spawn, Flesh Hounds, Furies, all these units kind of charging on in. This would be a good time for the Skull Cannons to try and replenish a little bit of their ammunition. Looks like we only have one shot left on that other one. Looks like the other one is fully depleted. As it kind of dive in, again, just these Furies can be diving down, keeping these Nurglings away from the point for as long as they can, while the Forsaken deal with the Flesh Hounds on the far side. And a lot of the core units, though, of Khorne not looking too strong here. Not a whole lot of infantry support. Actually, there is no infantry support for Khorne on the center ranks. It is just Spawn and the single entities kind of mixed in this engagement, which is going to be kind of giving a little bit of an edge to Nurgle, and they do get that overcasted fleshy abundance, so that's just going to be healing everything up more and more. While Nurgle has a very strong hold, the only thing is that they are kind of held at bay from this point, and that is going to allow Khorne to kind of thread their units in and just kind of slowly try and start taking it back, but they do kind of get pushed back ever so slightly, and Nurgle is going to be able to get some more bodies on the point as that balance flicks back and forth as Khorne just tries and wrest control of this point away from Nurgle. They are taking a very long time to do it, and in the meantime, that Exalted Great Unclean One is waddling his way on up, and as soon as he gets engaged in this point, that is pretty much when Khorne has to just abandon their efforts here, because once he gets in, they are just going to be so outmatched in terms of just that overall grind, and they do not want to be going up against him. This would be a good time to start putting a little bit of extra pressure here onto point 2, and that is exactly what those Bloodletters of Khorne are going to be doing. Initially kind of just starting to come on over to this far point, are now going to be looking to whittle down these Plague Bearers here in that second point, while the Fleshhounds do kind of pull things back, and both of those Skull Cannons pull out of melee, get some more shots off on to that Exalted Great Unclean One, just try to do as much damage as they can, but unfortunately for Khorne, down goes that Herald, and they will be losing that AoE buff to their surrounding units, and of course that leadership debuff as well is going to be hurting, especially with these Chaos Warriors of Khorne. Definitely don't want to be losing what little infantry support that they have, and things are looking fairly strong for Nurgle. Even in terms of damage, they are pretty even with Khorne, and they've been able to trade really well in terms of just the infantry fights. But those Skull Cannons slowly bringing down that Exalted Great Unclean One, and that'll be a very good win for Khorne if they're able to bring that guy down. But time is ticking for Khorne, as Nurgle is sitting almost at just a little over 3,500 at this point. So they have a rather large uphill battle to do, and at this point, Nurgle might just be able to kind of sit and hold one of these points, and the longer Khorne does take to kind of take any of these back, it is just going to be all that much more difficult. But yeah, he is going to be conceding, and Nurgle does take that first victory. Khorne just unable to really wrest control of the points away, and they do fall for that first game. So take a look at the after battle report, and we will update that scorecard as well, as we do have Tim the Wilder taking that first game with Nurgle. So that does put him up 1-0. So for the units here, let's go through Nurgle first. That Exalted Great Unclean One, not getting a whole lot of value, wasn't really engaged in melee, so wasn't able to really kind of drain down the Khorne forces. But in the meantime, Khorne really did have to focus quite a bit. At least both of those Skull Cannons were pretty much firing against it all game long. Soul Grinder, despite kind of the initial flat-footedness that it seemed like he was kind of doing, it did generate some pretty nice value, getting about 2,200. Both of the Cultists, and then we of course have the Plague Bearers. Nothing too astounding there. For the backup units, the Spawn did do quite well, the ones that got brought in, and of course the Forsaken did really well in that melee fight, all of them pretty much getting 1,000 or a little bit over. And then again, it was just pretty much just a holding game for Nurgle. They really got too far ahead for Khorne to kind of bring that thing back. And of course for Khorne's forces, both of the Skull Cannons did some pretty decent work, 1,600, 1,500 on those two. And then the rest of the units, though, unfortunately not able to do too much better. The Cultists did get some nice decent value themselves, Spawn as well, but just not enough support. A lot of the times in those battles, those Spawn were fighting without any kind of infantry support, and that really did kind of make them struggle quite a bit, and they just didn't have the DPS to get the Nurgle off that point. So let's switch on back over to our between battle, and we'll see what we have in store for us for our next game, as the next one is going to be on Arnheim. So we'll see what both sides going to be picking here. So let's see. So we didn't see any picks just yet, so we'll be waiting on our contestants to make their decisions on what they're going to be going for this second game. We kind of go a little bit back more to our previous match where, just Khorne, they definitely kept trying to just flood that point. They were able to take that far point very easily, but even though they were trying to kind of pull that attention between the two, Nurgle just was not going to get unstuck from that top point. Even though they were pretty much pushed to the very outer edge, just was not quite enough. And it looks like Outer Region has made his first 2 picks, so it's either going to be Tzeentch or Nurgle for Outer Region in this fight. And we'll see what Tim the Wilder does have in store for us for his counter pick. Or at least on Arnheim, Nurgle is a very strong faction to be bringing, just with how the layout of the terrain is, and they're really able to kind of control as many points as they can with kind of minimal movement between them. So we'll see what Tim the Wilder, considering he has already picked Nurgle in that first map, which definitely I would have considered to be kind of against the strengths of Nurgle, but that is off the table for him this time round. We'll see if he's going to be trying to bring maybe a little heavier on the range department. Could help to kind of try and just shoot Nurgle off the points. If he does fear that pick, or we could be seeing the reverse of our last matchup, which would be another Khorne and Nurgle matchup. I know it is probably one of the more common sights to be seeing between the many matchups on the field. We are still waiting on Tim the Wilder to bring out his next faction. Yep, Logic, I do not disagree with you there. Nurgle has gotten quite strong in Domination, just being they're able to field just so many more units. I mean, it's not even necessarily like that many more units. It's just enough to really put that pressure on more points than they were initially able to, where it makes their kind of movement speed a little bit less of an issue. And of course, just having their units be a little bit quicker overall isn't necessarily too bad. And it looks like we are going to be seeing Tim the Wilder on Tzeentch for his pick, so we can lock that in on his side round. And now we're just going to wait and see what Outer Region is going to be going with. So Tim the Wilder is going to be going with that ranged superiority by the looks of things. Really looking to kind of just deter that Nurgle pick for as much as he can. And we are going to be getting a light show as Outer Region is going to be responding with Tzeentch in kind. So a Tzeentch mirror, plenty of blues and pinks to go around for this next match. I don't think we're going to be seeing any nerfs to Nurgle in general, Logic. I think it's going to be more tweaking Domination, because it's a completely new format for Total War Warhammer. So we're going to be seeing that kind of just little settings here and there tweaked to see what works best, what is going to kind of make the game the most enjoyable. And of course, once Immortal Empires kind of rolls on in, that's going to be throwing in another major wrench to that whole balancing thing. But I think we're going to be seeing probably more tweaks to Domination than any particular faction in response to that. And I mean, of course, you also got to remember this isn't just a multiplayer game, so it's not going to be solely geared around those types of balancing. But yeah, still, I think, yeah, we'll be seeing a bit more on that. Hunting Bro, welcome to the stream. Should be some good fun. You only missed the first game, as we are getting into game 2 here pretty quick with that Tzeentch mirror. Outer Region is ready to go. I'm just going to let them know to switch up the banners, because they both are sitting on the same one right now. It's hard enough to tell which is which without that. Just make it a little bit easier to commentate on which units are where, without kind of highlighting all the units on the field at once. But looks like, yeah, Outer Region is going to be switch on over to another color there, so we'll be able to at least kind of give a little bit of better eye appeal. So, and then Tim the Wilder kind of switching himself, but yeah, it looks like Outer Region's ready. Just waiting on Tim the Wilder to ready up himself. I'm gonna take a quick little peek to see. Looks like he is pretty much ready to go. So both sides' armies looks pretty good. So then we'll be kind of getting into the next one. Yep, yeah, the new RORs will be fun. Yeah, this is going to be one of the things that, if CA, I feel like, is almost going to have to kind of try and bring the new factions up, at least, because as soon as the Immortal Empires comes in, it's going to really shift the favor away from the new factions, considering they have such a deep roster across the board, with the exception of a few factions. But overall, the depth of the old factions is just going to kind of reign supreme, at least initially. RORs will definitely help to kind of bring that up to par, just again giving some more variety. That's kind of really what is going to be the strength of all these factions. Let's switch the scene over here as they are loading on in, as we have that Zinchmir. So we are going to be seeing, it looks like we have Kairos on Tim the Wilder's side, while Outer Region is going to have just an Exalted Lord of Change. Otherwise, it is going to be Forsaken and Horrors for the rest of the units on the field. Just the numbers are really all that's going to be changing between these two early factions. Now, yeah, with the, like, Cathay and Kislev, I definitely think, especially Cathay, I think will be getting a lot more of those new units. I think Ogres are actually probably going to be a long way down the line, if at all, considering they're technically a DLC faction already, and historically those factions have not necessarily gotten any new stuff, at least for quite some time upon that initial release. Let's get into the armies. As Outer Region with his Exalted Lord of Change, going to be having Portoglyph, as well as Pink Fire of each, Blue Fire, and that is going to be it, with other than the Greater Arcane Conduit. We have a bunch of blue horrors, 3 pink horrors, 3 Forsaken in the back. Forsaken can be sitting in the rear, kind of getting those shots off initially, but he's going to be sitting up tight on that top point, while on the flip side, we will have Tim the Wilder down below, as he's going to be bringing Kairos, as he has the Gaze of Fate, Harmonic Convergence to really help with all of his Forsaken, and then Blue Fire of Zinch as well for some nice DPS. He also has Life Leeching, Fires of Change, and that Greater Arcane Conduit of his own. And for his units, it is going to be, of course, all of these Forsaken on the lower field. He is going to be outnumbering Outer Region, at least initially, in terms of melee. And then we have blue horrors spread throughout, and a couple of pink horrors in those center ranks. So things are going to be getting underway, and I definitely think in terms of initial positioning, Tim the Wilder definitely has the advantage here, considering he's going to be able to just extend his reach on these lower fields. And we've seen this before in this kind of, on this map actually, with this mirror, that Zinch, if they are able to just bring all of their units to bear, it is going to do so much better, because on the flip side, Outer Region, when he's coming down this hill here, he is only going to have 2, maybe 3 units able to fire in at once, while Tim the Wilder will be able to use pretty much his entire army in a nice little arc to kind of fire up and just kind of keep Outer Region at bay. So at least initially, I'm thinking Tim the Wilder pretty much has this in terms of just initial positioning, but we'll see how well the target priority is going to be kind of handled, and if he can kind of get some units maybe either wrapped around or try and pull things around on multiple sides. But we'll see how things do on all of this. And hunting, bro, for the demons in general, I think a lot of it is there's not a whole lot of variety on the factions. I mean, Zinch probably has more variety than others, but all the other ones, they have like their base unit, they have Forsaken, they have Spawn, they all have like pretty similar units across the board, so it doesn't feel that much of a change between them. And then really just the depth is going to be really what's kind of will make those demons all the better in the future as things kind of progress. But yeah, that's just kind of be how brand new factions generally are. They just don't have as many tools to bring to the table. with some exceptions in the past. Like I think like the most recent additions, like I think Tomb Kings and the Vampire Coast, when they were first brought to the table, they had some pretty good roster depth right out the get-go, while other ones like Norska and Beastmen, and I guess even the Wood Elves to an extent, really didn't have that many variety of play styles to really kind of go through. So it was kind of a, you know what you're kind of going up against when you played them. But back to the task at hand. So we're going to be seeing that exact thing as I was describing before. Tim the Wilder is getting that arc on the bottom field. He has one blue horror going to be taken at point 2, while everything else is going to be pointing all of their shots right up this valley, and that is going to be a not a good thing for Outer Region at all, considering he is just going to be taking a massive amount of damage. And I think, though, Tim the Wilder does need to kind of conserve his Winds of Magic. He's not really going to be doing a whole lot using that blue fire against these blue horrors. Even without the shield, they're not going to do a whole lot of damage. They're just so spread out, and the just the strength of that spell much better used on Forsaken once their shield is down. Though of course, if he does kind of put some pressure on pretty soon to try and just capitalize on taking out that shield, then that spell may not be totally in vain. But on to the lower field, Outer Region is going to be bringing in some Forsaken and some Spawn. Now these guys are pretty isolated, though it will kind of pull the attention of at least a few of the units to kind of get some shots off onto these units, especially without the support of the rest of their ranged. So Tim the Wilder could at his leisure kind of pick these two units off, while Outer Region tries to force more and more units, and he is bringing his more I guess expensive range units. So he's bringing the pink horrors with their extended range to try and kind of poke away at the units of Tim the Wilder on to the lower grounds. And some more reinforcements going to be coming in, as we do have the Screamers going to be coming in as a response to the Spawn. With their bonus versus large, should be able to kind of help chunk away at them. But right now, more and more units are kind of slowly consolidating for Outer Region, but keeping them out of range of the rest of the units, and it is going to be forcing Tim the Wilder to kind of rotate a little bit away from the oncoming just massive armies coming down that hill, because he does have to be mindful of these units here. They do pose quite a bit of a threat if they kind of come in completely unopposed and hit him in his flank, so he does have to be a little careful with that. A nice kind of pink flyer going to be going down should be able to break the shield of both of these units pretty much, as it does rebound off the wall, getting a little bit more spread. But yeah, it does take the shield off, at least from the blue horrors, almost from the Forsaken. And that pink fire, or the blue fire, going to be continuing to kind of get some shots off, taking out the shield on the Forsaken. And that's going to allow these pink horrors to get some decent damage off on to them. But otherwise, so far, both armies just kind of staring each other down. And really, though, the pressure is going to be on Outer Region here. He has to take the initiative, because he is in the position where he needs more points eventually, and he needs to kind of slowly work his way down, but he's playing it very carefully, just kind of taking some shots where he can. And so far has been able to do fairly decent work considering the disadvantage of his position, able to trade evenly up until this point, kind of just slowly plucking away at the shields, already dropping a few units. Tim the Wilder going to be kind of moving in, though, with his Forsaken, going to be kind of going in, though, to the jaws of Outer Region's range units who have really consolidated up on that hill. More shots going to be raining in against those Forsaken, but in it comes that Portal Glyph from Outer Region. Going to be getting in some aerial support, diving down onto this group of horrors here, and the engagement is underway as we have Forsaken just spread throughout. We also do have some Chaos Knights, though, from Tim the Wilder charged in on top of that, and the air force is underway, going to be shutting down more and more of the black backline units. And we also have Spawn going to be charging in as well. This is actually, no, this is Tim the Wilder stuff. Spawn to come in to kind of push away those Chaos Furies to try and alleviate the range units, because at this point right now, honestly, Outer Region might have a little bit of an advantage with so many units tied up in the back, because his units are completely unopposed, though that front engagement isn't going necessarily as well for him, as the Forsaken on the other side doing some pretty decent work, especially with the help of those Chaos Knights. able to kind of quickly work their way through Outer Region's own Forsaken as they kind of work their way to try and shut down the range units on the far side. But the spawn diving in to the backside, again, just kind of doing a nice bit of just pulling the attention and just keeping all of these pink horrors from firing against his own forces. We were getting a very nice barrage, though, from Tim the Wilder, as it's going to be hitting quite a few of the horrors. Though the pink horrors, the more expensive units, were able to kind of pull their way out, but it is also going to be clipping those Forsaken as well, doing some nice bit of work there, trying to open up the door for Tim the Wilder's Forsaken to kind of stream up that hill and kind of put pressure and divide the forces of Outer Regions. Tzeentch, as he just tries and does some decent work, but in exchange, Outer Region going to be able to get his own bombardment down, and this looks like it is going to be hitting a decent amount of the units. The pink horrors initially on the move are able to get out before they take too much damage, so not a whole lot of damage really dealt from that one against Tim the Wilder, so he's able to kind of mitigate a lot of that, and that balance definitely kind of edging towards Tim the Wilder, as he does get a nice lead in terms of damage, and is definitely not going to be helping Outer Region at all, because he's going to be wanting to trade a lot more better into Tim the Wilder, especially because he, again, just needs to kind of put that pressure onto the ground, as he needs to move his forces farther and farther south. But at the time being, he is going to be unable to really do that. The units that he is sending in is pretty much just delaying these units. These Furies aren't able to really kind of do enough damage to kind of notably impact the units on the ground, as they themselves kind of take quite a bit in return. Nice little volley from the pink horrors should be able to kind of help kind of clear up these blue horrors, as the blue horrors really doing a good job kind of holding things at bay. Nice blue fire coming in from the Exalted Lord of Change, but that Exalted Lord of Change, I must have missed a pretty decent sniping attempt, because that Exalted Lord of Change is at death's door now, unstable, and I don't think he is going to be able to sustain himself anymore. A Gaze of Fate must have locked him down. I had not seen anything really kind of getting some good fire in against him, but down goes the Lord of Outer Region, and with that is going to be a massive loss to the fighting potential of his forces, considering how much Tzeentch relies on the Winds of Magic. We are getting some more support kind of coming in on the lower field, as we get more spawn kind of streaming their way in, but again, without any kind of good support, that is pretty much just going to get shot to pieces by a lot of Tim the Wilder's own forces here, as he does bring in somebody at Outer Region, going to be conceding, having lost too many important units and just was unable to really gain any ground moving down that hill. So we'll take a quick look at the after battle report, and then we will move on to our second semifinal of the evening, as Tim the Wilder does advance to the finals. But we do have Kairos Fate Weaver getting 1500, the Forsaken not doing a ton of damage, but the horrors on the other hand, at least the blue horrors, well, I was going to say they did pretty well. A couple of them did, but nothing to stand out on that front, while the kind of supporting units, nothing, again, not doing too well. These pink horrors did rather well, getting almost 1100. And then beyond that, nothing to really write home about, but unfortunately on to Outer Region side, it was not exactly such a fun story to tell, as the Exalted Lord of Change for him took a massive amount of damage and did end up falling, and very well may have been to that pink horror fire. But the pink horrors on his side were able to get some decent value, but overall, the spawn definitely did not perform as well. They kind of charged in, and with their low armor was really some nice shots to be had for Tim the Wilder's own horrors, and really made short work of them. But that is going to be it for that battle. Let's get things set up for our next one. We'll update the bracket. So it's going to be Big B's against one of our other contestants. It was undecided at the start of our last semifinal, but it has to be ready to go at this point. We've had plenty of time, and it is going to be Dante's Inferno going to be on the other side. So we'll update him on here. So we'll add Dante. We'll just have that because his name is so very long. Still doesn't quite fit in as nicely. And then we will update our screen as well to kind of reset all of the stats going into the next one. And as always, we'll rehost that lobby, considering still not quite where it should be. For whatever reason, doesn't like the interchange of the contestants. So as soon as we get we got Big B's in, so heat will be on the left side. And then we will have Dante's Inferno on the other. So it is going to be all RTKs from this point on, as you have Big B's, Dante, and Tim the Wilder all going to be representing RTK from this point on. Definitely had the numbers for going into the tournament across the board. I think it was around 50% was almost represented by them. So we have both the contestants in. Let's see if we have any picks so far. And it should be Big B's on the first pick. So it is pick 2, ban 1. And the map is going to be on the Crossing the Sea of Claws, just like the last series. Yep, hopefully everyone is enjoying their Friday night, watching some Warhammer 3. Had some good fun so far, and if you are just joining, it is the second semifinal of the day. First one was Tim the Wilder versus Outer Region, and Tim the Wilder did win that one. And speaking of which, got to update one more score on the table. It is 0-0. This is the first game. And Big B's is going to be going Nurgle and Kislev for his first two. Again, Nurgle going to be on the table. I still think that this probably would be a better faction to hold off until at least the second one, which is on Arnheim. Just having that, but of course, if you do want to make sure that you can play them, you're going to be having them on the table. Hey, World Beater, welcome to the stream. Glad you could make it. So just waiting on Dante's response to the Nurgle and Kislev picks, and we'll see which side is going to be coming out on top for our first game. This map definitely has quite a bit of distance between all of the capture points, which generally would make Nurgle a little bit of a disadvantage. But we did see in the last series that Nurgle was able to still come out on top, even against a more mobile faction on a rather more open map. So we'll see what we have in store for us for this next one. But otherwise, Kislev would be the other pick for Big B's, who kind of goes a little bit, or a lot, against what kind of Nurgle is. They have quite a bit of mobility themselves, and a lot of ranged potential on top of that. So we'll see which side, but it does provide quite a bit of a overlap between what Big B's will be prepared against. We are still waiting on Dante to respond. Just giving a little reminder to Dante to see what, but it looks like he is just trying to figure out which faction is going to be best in this first fight. Give him plenty of time. Got through our first series and we got a little earlier start than normal. So plenty of time to spare, at least on my end. It could be various degrees of how late it is for our viewers today. Again, well, thanks for joining us on a Friday evening. Definitely could be doing some more exciting things, especially with summer well on the horizon, at least for those in the warmer climates. It's been a very nice day, at least around here. Yep, I am doing quite well, World Beater. Yeah, I guess we did kind of mix up the tradition we did miss last week for our weekly tournament. We are back at it again this week. Though I think most weeks we are going to be doing that, and it does look like we have both picks in now. It is going to be a Nurgle mirror, so we are getting Nurgle off the table up front. But we'll see how exciting that's going to be, as both sides are going to be smashing up against one another with all of their draining potential. Almost certainly we'll be seeing Exalted Great Unclean Ones, though of course you could maybe argue to be bringing in the Herald, just kind of reduce the funds and then have a little bit of extra mobility as well. But considering how there isn't going to be really any way to circumnavigate those big Exalted Unclean Ones, I think they're still going to be a rather formidable lord to bring here in the mirror. I can't say I'm all too familiar with it. I have kind of avoided playing Nurgle too much myself, but should be at least both sides will be happy, considering how Nurgle's followers are. All of the followers as happy as they can be, despite their outward appearance. Dante is quick on the trigger, though, and he is ready himself. So now we are going to be just waiting on Big B's to kind of follow up with his own selection. And then we're getting underway for our second semifinal here momentarily. Yeah, Big B still building up that army, not quite ready on his side. So we still give him plenty of time on that. Yeah, here for, Nurgle matchup can be trying to put as much pressure as they can kind of across the board, while still having their kind of roaming initial death squad kind of really being the big threat on the field, but need to at least, Nurglings will do quite well with that, kind of providing that pressure on all different points with their Vanguard and being extremely cost effective in terms of just capping points in general and holding them as well. They have plenty of HP, pretty decent speed for Nurgle, and just having that Vanguard as well can really kind of help put that pressure on some kind of maybe for some forgotten points. Excuse me for just a sec. Dog's making a little bit of noise in the other room. All right, both sides ready to go. So let's get on into our first game of the second semifinal. Nurgle no less. So we will have Dante's Inferno on the right side. He will be the green Nurgle forces. And then we will have Big B's on the left. So it's looking to be fairly similar armies between the two of them. Two Exalted Great Unclean Ones. And then we have two Cultists versus one. And then Plague Bearers kind of for the rest. With a couple of those Exalted Plague Bearers to boot as well. So both the of the Cultists on... this is going to be Big B's side of things. We do have the Icon of Eternal Virulence, which is going to be just debuffing the opposing forces as much as possible. And of course, he does have the Gate of Nurgle. The other one is also going to be coming in with that icon. And then the Exalted Great Unclean One for the Lord is going to be having the Blight Swarm, Stream of Corruption, Fleshy Abundance, and of course coming in with that Pestilent Decay. Pretty standard for the Exalted. And then for the other side of things, it is going to be 3 of the Exalted Plague Bearers with one regular Plague Bearer, a spawn, and that Exalted Great Unclean One a little bit on the backside. I think probably would have liked to have him deployed here, but will be waddling his way on forward. And then for his spells, going to be pretty much the same thing. So Pestilent Decay, Flesh Abundance, and the Stream of Corruption. And the Cultist does have that Icon of Eternal Virulence as well. And we're going to be coming in with some more support with those Plague Bearers coming in from the reinforcement pool. While Big B's is going to be kind of slowly coming on down the hill too, but both sides going fairly narrow, at least for the initial armies. So they're not going to be probably looking to be spreading out too much in the early stages, though those Vanguard pressure points on both sides probably could be expecting to be seeing some Nurglings thrown at points 3 and point 1 with both sides on that. We have some spawn coming in to provide a little bit more DPS, but both sides going to be wanting to be a little cautious, not throwing everything at once into the meat grinder, especially when you have 2 Mortis engines going to be facing off against one another. You're going to be wanting to kind of send things in as you need them. And of course, with those Exalted Plague Bears having that ranged on them, they actually can do some pretty decent damage, especially against that Exalted Great Unclean One if they are left unattended to. So they, with having 3 of them on the side of Dante, he can probably put some pretty good pressure on that Exalted Great Unclean One. Just having these guys almost just stay behind the rest of the Plague Bearers can do some pretty decent work on that side. Things slowing down just a bit here, but Nurglings going to be coming in from Big B's with that Vanguard. And as I mentioned before, going to be putting that pressure onto point 3, looking to kind of cap that and hold as many of the points as they can, just kind of throwing stuff at all 3 points at once, while just kind of squaring off against one another in the center, kind of playing chicken just a little bit, not wanting to really commit too heavily, especially with, of course, those Exalted Great Unclean Ones going to be sitting so dangerously close to each other and that center engagement. Cultist can be coming in for Dante, having 2 of those on the field, so he has that Icon of Eternal Violence on the second one as well. So both armies looking fairly similar to what they have in store on both sides. Plague Bearers spawn and the Cultists are pretty much the center points for both sides up till now. And they are going to be squaring off. Exalted Plague Bearers are going to be taking the front point for Dante. Going to be hoping to get into range against that Exalted Great Unclean One. And then the other 2 Exalted Plague Bearers on Big B's side are actually going to be kind of looking to stay behind the rest of the Plague Bearers. Being a little outnumbered, it might play a little bit of a role into that. But just having these Plague Bearers absorb as much of that incoming fire versus the other way around. And Nurgling's going to be putting some more pressure onto point 1. While Dante has not put any pressure really on either of the far points, he does have a bit of time to do that. We still have a minute and a half before the points do unlock. It looks like we do have some Plague Toads sitting up on the hill, looking to kind of move their way on down to point 3 and contest those Nurglings that have been thrown their way from Big B's side of things. Hopefully things going to be speeding up a little bit. The Nurgle mirror is slow enough to be working without the lag, but we will just have to fight through it here, as the Exalted Plague Bearers are going to be pushing farther and farther, as the regular Plague Bearers on Big B's side at this point would like to kind of try and screen these guys out, because they are getting really close to being within range of that Exalted Unclean One, and the center point, it looks like they are going to be getting some shots in. Exalted Unclean One actually going to be kind of coming forward, looking to just charge right into the maws of these Exalted Plague Bearers, and if these guys can get set up and get some volleys in before the rest of their units kind of take that center stage, they can get some pretty decent value on this. So yeah, Feral Boy, it is a Nurgle mirror starting off, and the lag is not going to be helping the speed of this one at all. But this is going to be probably very much a point-driven match. This is not going to be where one side completely decimates the other. Most likely, without the exception maybe these Exalted Plague Bearers getting some good shots on that Exalted Great Unclean One, but a nice stream of corruption taking off about quarter HP from both of these Exalted Plague Bearers, and it looks like we're going to be going and getting a summon. I believe this is from Big B's side, as you're going to be getting some bodies in front of these Exalted Plague Bearers, that Exalted Great Unclean One charging right in, and I think only a little bit of the shots from all these units were able to kind of go off, and that Blight Swarm coming off from Big B's as well. So a pretty good initial engagement for Big B's here, who is the blue side of things, while on the flanks, Dante is going to be contesting those Nurglings, and on the top point there, it does look like those Nurglings are completely unopposed from Big B's side, as that center engagement, though, is going to be where a lot of this is going to be decided. And if we look at what is engaged in melee here, definitely I would say the advantage goes to Big B's, considering he is getting so much more value at doing damage to two of these Exalted Plague Bearers and one regular Plague Bearer. Well, only a couple of the regular Plague Bearers are engaged around the Mortis engine for Big B, so Big B's going to be trading a lot nicer, and is definitely reflecting on the damage dealt so far. Just so much more value on that train, and even the third Exalted, no, this is from the second Exalted Plague Bearer still, and another nice stream of corruption can be wrecking right through the very lightly armored units. So things looking pretty decently for Big B's up until this point. His units can be a lot more kind of free to reign on the backside, though the cultists did kind of push through and drop a summon down to kind of tie up these Exalted Plague Bearers, kind of keep them from firing. That is only going to be a slight delay before they are free once again to kind of turn their attention to the Plague, or the Exalted Great Unclean One on the other side of things. I will kind of take a little look up on the rest of the field. Some Forsaken going to be looking to try and contest these Nurglings, while a second unit was looking to kind of go that route, but I think those Forsaken would have no problem dealing with two of those Nurglings. Other Nurglings do kind of come in on the other side, as those Plague Toads did redirect their attention to the center engagement, as they do kind of charge right on into these Plague Bearers against Big B's. And the center engagement still just kind of both sides just smashing up against one another. Both armies kind of giving a little bit of clearance around both of these Exalted Unclean Ones, as they do kind of duke it out a little bit in the center, kind of turning around on both sides, as both of these cultists do draw the attention of Dante's own Exalted Unclean One, though he does give him a little smack of that bell, kind of trying to open up the distance to Big B's own Lord, as they are kind of slowly doing some decent amount of damage to him, but especially with that Blight Swarm down as well, getting that minus 20 melee defense. But as I mentioned before, just the value that the Exalted Unclean One from Big B's is getting so much more. So we'll compare those up until this point. So over 2,000 so far on Big B's Lord, while if we look at the other side of things, only 350, if I am looking at that right. So this is the Exalted Plague Bearer. Oh no, that's the Exalted Plague Bearer. So the Exalted Great Unclean One, I was like, that does not seem right. So the Exalted Great Unclean One is 1,000. So it's double the value for Big B's Lord here, So that is going to be where a lot of that differential comes, and that has been so far because he's just been surrounded by exalted plague bearers of Nurgles. He's getting so much more value than the other side, but he would probably like to get a little bit of a healing up at this point. He is getting a little low, but nothing to be fretting about too soon here, as another stream of corruption going right on through all of these units, and we'll kind of give it a little look of where the lines are drawn here on this battle. So the red is going to be Dante's Inferno, as he's been able to put some pretty decent pressure. Now he is able to take that first point, or the center point, with the amount of units that he has here on the side flanks. Actually, no, Dante's Inferno. Let's see. Yeah, no, Big B's does have the 2 far points, though, and those are the points that he's kind of put those units and putting a little bit of pressure on, that Dante really hasn't focused really any units to really contest that. Now he is sending in those Nurglings, but is a little too late on those side points. So that is where Big B's is going to have that advantage, is in the overall points, but that is still a long way to go before that is going to be decided. So it is, again, no reason to really be too worried about if you are a Dante here. Just kind of slowly try and drain things down, and really the Exalted Great and Clean One probably best to kind of stay where he's at, try and kind of position himself more in between these two blob fights, just try and drain down as much of Big B's own infantry, though those infantry units have kind of been able to keep their distance, those Exalted Plague Bearers having used up all of their ammunition. Able to get not a whole lot of value, only about 500 on that, as they kind of slowly kind of pepper away their shots. You can see that Dante's Exalted Great and Clean One has getting a little close to his healing cap, and the Exalted Great and Clean One on Big B's side would probably like to be getting a heal here pretty soon, but he's been using a lot of his Winds of Magic for those streams of corruption to kind of whittle down his opponent's forces as quickly as he can at the expense of his own healing. We do have some spawn coming in from Dante to kind of add to the mix. Well, we do have spawn from Big B's as well. More units going to be kind of streaming in to try and contest this top point, and it does look like those Forsaken will be eventually able to kind of push back those Nurglings. Nothing else is really being sent that way from Big B's, so Dante should start to kind of flip the script a little bit in terms of at least the points, and start clawing his own way back here as things kind of slowly work their way in the later, or I guess the mid stages of this fight, as it is just going to be drains on both sides, as the Mortis engines are going to be just generating tons of value, though, on all fronts. That Cultist is still caught out in the back, but that is tying up 1 unit of spawn and 1 unit of Plague Bears. I'm kind of keeping as many of those units, but they are still on the point. And as I say that, Big B's is able to slowly, actually that balance is kind of just jumping back and forth here as damage is dealt on both sides, but it is on just a knife's edge between Dante and Big B's on point 2. And if Big B's is able to kind of take point 2 back, he is starting to lose the ground, though, on the far side. Forsaken coming in, but he does have some Forsaken of his own, looking to contest that on the far side. Plague Toads and more Nurglings all putting more pressure on to point 3. So Big B's really can't afford to lose ground, and he can't really just take the time either to kind of pull units off of this fight and kind of try and assist those other ones. He has to pretty much do that entirely from those reinforcements, as we do get some more spawn and Nurglings to add more to that capping pressure, and he is slowly bringing that into his favor. But if he does end up losing his Exalted Great and Clean One here, which Dante is seeing that opportunity with how low he has gotten, and is going to be diving in with his own as he tries to get some hits off on to Big B's Lord, and Big B needs a heal at this point. Earlier on, he was able to kind of still just take that damage, but at this point, if he loses his Lord, that is going to shift that balance precariously against him in terms of just that melee fight, with how much healthier the Exalted Great Unclean One is for Dante. Spawn coming in to just kind of put that pressure on and hold back with their own mass as the Lord tries to path his way through. And it does look like we got a little bit of healing there. I think it was a little bit lower, but he definitely needs a bit more if he's going to be able to kind of feel confident enough to really stay engaged in the melee. And I think he needs to kind of try and find some less damaging forces to go up against. Looks like we are going to be getting some healing down, some fleshy abundance. Actually, that is going down on Dante's Inferno, so more healing going their way, while on Big B's side, again, just still lacking that healing that he desperately needs. And even though he is not necessarily directly engaged with Dante's own Lord, just being in close proximity, he is slowly taking damage bit by bit. And he has taken point 2, but in the meantime has lost out on both of the far points. So Big B's has kind of gone from 2 to 1, though he has kind of switched out on which points has been under his own control. And Dante is going to be able to start kind of slowly clawing his way back, sitting down by about 1,300 in terms of total points at this stage. And his own Lord, though, has pretty much hit his own healing cap. So if Big B's is a little bit more cautious, he could be able to kind of slowly grind down the Exalted Great Unclean One on the other side. But if we take a look at the value now, initially Dante was a little bit down in terms of the damage value from him, while it's still Big B's Exalted Great Unclean One is sitting at 5,000 total damage to the 3,600 on Dante's side. So still able to have quite the better damage or value up until this point, and a lot of that, though, is from the spells that he's been casting. A lot more Stream of Corruptions versus the healing, in which Dante has kind of done the reverse of, where he's seeing pretty much all healing on his side, and as a result, he is at his healing cap, and a lot of his units have been able to maintain their presence on the field because of it. Cultist, Beast of Nurgle, all just putting that pressure on that Exalted Great Unclean One, trying to just nibble at its heels as it does try and get out of this fight. Leadership is getting fairly low, though, and does not want to be taking any more additional hits to kind of cause him to slowly start crumbling away bit by bit. But at this stage, I think Dante is sitting a lot more comfortably. He has been able to equalize the damage value from earlier on, so I think the momentum is definitely shifting in his favor, especially with all of that healing. He is definitely sitting much higher than Big B's at this point. And yet, even though I thought Big B's would definitely have the much better advantage earlier on, was putting the pressure where he needed to, Dante had flipped the script at this point, and now he's able to take point 2 back from Big B's, even though Big B's does have that top point here, so he has been able to put enough pressure with those Forsaken and Spawn and those Nurglings to kind of push off the Forsaken that Dante had sent on that front. But Dante is probably going to be still content with taking 2 of these points. He was able to kind of take those 2 points back early enough in this fight, so he's not going to be too worried about that point total as long as he is able to hold both of these, while Big B's is starting to put some pretty decent pressure with Forsaken and Spawn against point 3, and we are finally getting that healing. He needed to get that Fleshy Abundance off, and he finally did, and that is going to be giving his Exalted Great Unclean One the confidence that he needs to, pretty much equalizing the HP now between the 2 lords, so he's going to be able to turn around with much more confidence and charge right back into the fray. But he has a lot of units to kind of push off of this point 2, as Dante has solidly entrenched himself in that position, while the far points are still going to be putting more pressure for Big B's, as he has those Spawn Nurglings slowly and fairly easily going to be able to kind of peel these guys off and push straight into point 3 and take that back. Those Spawn are going to be charging in. Curse of the Slug goes off just as these guys are charging in, with the speed reduction by 45%, and even these Forsaken now might even be a good idea to kind of turn and try and fight these Spawn and hold them off of this point. Though with the Nurglings and the Spawn, will be able to have enough capping power, and that is exactly what he is going to be looking to do, charging forward, and especially with the support of his own Spawn, should be able to trade very well. And just off the charge there, a very nice trade for those Forsaken, and Spawn without their infantry support is going to fall pretty quickly to those that do. So Big B's looking a lot better now that he was just a couple minutes ago, able to take those 2 far points once again, and that is going to be putting Dante now in a bit of a pickle, as he has most of his forces all centered around this center point, and they have a long way to go if they're going to be putting enough pressure on the far points. It looks like he is trying to put that onto point 1 for Nurglings and Plague Bearers coming in on that front, and he tries to run through this little choke point here. But the spawn and those Nurglings are going to have a thing or two to say about how quickly that's going to be happening, as all the spawn just dive in. That is just 3 spawn there, as the Exalted Great Unclean One coming in to just try and speed up that process. But that is pulling a lot of that pressure away. And in the meantime, though, this Exalted Great Unclean One for Big B's is not winning this. Well, of course, those Exalted Plague Bears are definitely going to be turning the tide against him there. He's been able to kind of push back that Beast of Nurgle, but with those Exalted Plague Bears, that volley is just doing mincemeat of that Exalted Great Unclean One, and that is going to be it for the Exalted Great Unclean One for Big B side. But is he still going to have time? Because he's pretty much done his job, hold the attention for long enough, and can Dante take the far points back? At this point, he's going to need to probably take all 3 points at some stage in this. He needs point 1 as quickly as he can to at least kind of slow down how long it's going to take, but only 200 points left for Big B's to take it from Dante in this stage. He may just have enough time. These guys ain't getting to point 3 anytime soon, so with point 3 by itself, I think that is going to be it. I think Big B's has it pretty handedly at this point. There's just not enough time left for Dante, and none of his units are going to be fast enough to get on to these far points. So even though he made a very formidable show of himself, able to kind of balance out the damage early on, it is not going to be enough, and Big B's will take that first one. So let's take a look at the final tally with the value on both sides. So for the Exalted Great Unclean One on Dante's side of things, getting 4665, well on Big B side, 6,013, a ton of value, and a lot of that was because he was surrounded by Exalted Plague Bearers and getting so much more value in that early stage, and was really did show with how long he was able to hold out. Exalted Plague Bearers getting some good value for Big B's for the rest of his support units. The spawn doing some okay work. Forsaken as well, able to push back Dante from that high point. And then if we take a look at the rest of the forces on Dante's side, those Exalted Plague Bearers did some nice work. 1828, over 1,000 on them. Especially in that very late stage, getting some good volleys off on to Big B's Lord. Otherwise, nothing else to really write home about. And let's update the scorecard before we kind of get into our next one. So Big B's does take the lead 1-0. And with that, Nurgle is off the table. So we'll see what both sides have for us for our next one, which is going to be on Arnheim, as we did see on that previous one. So while they are in this process of selecting their factions and their picks, I'm going to let the dogs out real quick, and I'll be right back. Should be back well in time before both sides are ready to go. All right. So I have returned, and we have no progress yet on our next picks. So let's see. It should be Dante's turn for his own selection. Just going to double check the bracket. Yeah, his Big B's had his first picks. Yeah, we have now gotten through our most grueling matchup for the series. Nurgle is off the table for both sides coming into this next one. So as even of a playing field as we're going to likely get here. So we'll see what we have in store for our next one. So, we'll have our full selection. Khorne, Tzeentch, Ogres, Kislev, probably going to be one of the more common picks coming up. So we have Dante does go with Tzeentch and Khorne for his two, and we will have Big B's responding with Khorne himself. And then for Dante's rebuttal between Tzeentch and Khorne. So really, Tzeentch versus Khorne is a very good matchup. I think it's probably one of the more fun ones. But we are going to be seeing another mirror, as it is going to be a Khorne versus Khorne. So we had Nurgles, and now we're going to have Khorne on Khorne action. So we're going to see how well that's going to be going. Should be a little bit more exciting, a little bit, well, it's both sides going to be melee again, but it is going to be a lot more higher DPS on both sides, a bit more speed, a bit more maneuverability, and I think a bit more flexibility. But again, both sides wanting to do the same factions for our two fights. This one is, of course, going to be on Arnheim. So plenty of room to maneuver on both sides. So they don't necessarily have a whole lot of flexibility in terms of the deployment areas. Both sides kind of be a little bit more constrained on that side. I would not be surprised one bit if these two are planning it to an extent logic, but they definitely they are going through the picks and bans. I think it would have been a bit more fun to see Kislev here, but the Nurgle one's not necessarily so surprising, but when it happens again with another Khorne mirror, then you just gotta maybe start asking some questions. We'll see how this game goes, see if we see mirror number 3 in the third matchup, if Dante's able to kind of turn the tide back into his own favor. Yeah, both sides, you're going to pretty much be expecting to have infantry on both sides. I know at least kind of around the more, I guess, the earlier stages, but closer to the release of Warhammer 3, this matchup was much more halberds and spawn. And I don't think it's deviated too much from that. Having those two units on top of one another in melee is a very strong combination. Having the very formidable spawn in melee, and then having that halberds with that support is very good for Khorne against really a wide variety of factions, not just in the mirror. But both sides are ready, so we'll load on in, and we'll take a sneak peek at their armies when we switch on over. So we are going to be seeing kind of a slight variation of that between the two of them. So on Big B side of things, it is going to be spawn and dual weapons versus the spawn and halberds of Dante's Inferno's army. Otherwise, both sides do have a herald, and then just kind of some filler with one extra halberd and a Chaos Fury on the other side of things. one more unit of spawn on Dante's side as well. Otherwise, the overall feel of both armies are going to be very similar. You're going to be wanting to stack the spawn with those infantry units on both sides. For now, for the Herald on Big B's side, he does have him on his Juggernaut and does have the Locust of Wrath, giving that plus 40 melee attack in an AoE for a short duration, and then Revel and Slaughter as well. So really looking to buff that melee fight. And it does do quite well in that regard. And as I said before, 4 Chaos Warriors with dual weapons, 3 spawn, and a halberd for Big B's. On to the other side for Dante, he does have the halberd and spawn combination instead, so he is going to be coming in with those 4 halberds and then 4 spawn to back them up, with a herald as well. Now this one just has the Locust of Wrath, does not have the Revel and Slaughter, and it does look like it is only going to be on foot, so a lot more cheaper Lord than on Big B side of things, but is a very straightforward and very linear army, not really going to be having too much variation in terms of strategy on that side. You just got to make sure that those spawn and halberds do stay together and don't get separated in those engagements. And we'll see how things are going to be faring as both sides are readied up, and we should be getting underway, or at least one side is readied up. I heard the bell for them. It does look like both deployments are pretty much set in stone between them, and there we are. Big B's going to be moving on forward himself. And at least at this early stages, neither side is really putting too much weight on the top. It does look like we have one unit. I mean, that's just Chaos Fury, so they have no capture weight themselves. Just up here to kind of scout things out, make sure that there wasn't anything trying to sneak its way up on that side. But so far, both sides are looking to just contest points 1 and 2, and I imagine both sides will have either Chaos Warhounds or those Flesh Hounds to try and just put that additional pressure on those top points, get that speed up there, or some Bloodletters or something of that nature to kind of at least force a response from the other side, however that may be. And Big B's is going to elect to kind of sit back and just kind of bring in more and more reinforcements. We do have a Cultist of Khorne now going to be coming to the table with that Gate of Khorne, not coming in with anything else on that side. And I don't think we have seen any of the response. Actually, we do have one Cultist from Dante as well, with that same Gate of Khorne on his side. So very similar styles. Looks like he is on horseback though versus Big B's, who I believe is only on foot. So again, a little bit more expensive there, so I had to wait a little bit. There is the second Cultist coming in for Dante. It looks like both of those do have the speed of being on horse, so we'll be able to quickly regroup with the rest of his army. And all of these Chaos Furies just kind of hanging out overhead, just kind of keeping eyes on. We do get some quick mobility in with these Flesh Hounds. No, there's not a whole lot of room to really maneuver on these lower fields. I think I would probably have brought those guys up towards point 3, just put some pressure there. But again, they can still reach out and kind of contest this far point, because nothing is really kind of pushing out for Dante as he's keeping things nice and tight up against the wall of that cliff. As both sides just kind of staring off against one another, waiting for the other to kind of make a little bit of a misjudgment and then try and capitalize on that. Well, Big B's does bring in the first pressure on the top side, as he does have those Bloodletters going to be coming in through the tree line, and these guys are still going to be hidden. So for the time being, at least Dante is not going to be knowing that they are up there. He does have, I believe, those... There's these Chaos Furies. So these guys are still down below, so he will not have eyes on that top field until those guys are on that point. So he will have to wrest control of that top point from Big B's. I don't see him bringing any forces up there to be able to get there in time. Chaos Furies do dive down on top of the Flesh Hounds, kind of keeping their charge bonus at bay, but they are in close proximity to these Chaos Warriors with halberds, though that does pull one unit away from the rest of the fight. And we're going to be seeing how well both of these sides do, as the halberd spawn versus the Chaos Warriors and the spawn themselves, and which side is going to be coming out on top. We got summons coming down on both sides as we get bloodletters being dropped behind enemy lines, trying to just get those rear charges in, and both lords are going to be duking it out in the center as well. One, though, is going to be on that Herald of Khorne and has the better buffs for the melee fight, coming in with that Revel of Slaughter as well, but the plus 40 melee attack is active on both of those sides, so both sides are really just going to be chewing through the other unit, and these spawn just melted under the pressure as Big B's doing some pretty good work against that initial engagement, as the spawn just not trading so well on that side of things. Is that this spawn for Big B's seem to be landing so many more better hits than against Dante here, as the mobility from these Big B's units starting to kind of wrap around the side, though the Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne going to be putting that pressure on to point 2, as the center engagement still just washing up against one another. But Big B's so far looks to be kind of winning in spots, though this far flank here is definitely gone the way for Dante. So you win some, you'll lose some in this engagement, but overall the balance is pretty even in terms of damage. Velt and the Herald of Khorne for Big B's has really kind of put on the wheels as he's been pushing that Herald of Khorne back, though he is kind of getting really overextended. Does land a pretty nice hit against him, but now he's going to be getting a little bogged down, but being on his Juggernaut should be able to kind of pull back and get in and regroup with the rest of his own army. And these Exalted Bloodletters kind of pulling these Chaos Warriors of Halberds with them, and in the meanwhile, that is going to be an excellent engagement for them. They will just tear these guys to shreds, even with these Fleshhounds coming into support. Now, if these other Fleshhounds, though, can kind of swoop around and get that nice rear charge, they should be able to kind of start putting a major dent in that side. But both sides just catastrophic losses across the board. There was a lot less units on the field now than there was just a little bit before. Big B's units has been able to very solidify their points on the top, and again, nothing has been sent in response to that. Dante still relying on the center ground to try and kind of pull things back into his favor. These guys do end up rampaging, and that is probably going to you're going to either need to bring these Chaos Warriors in to support them, or just kind of accept the fact that those spawn, they are not going to be lasting too long, and that's pretty much what they're going to be doing. And in the meantime, though, the Herald of Khorne from Big B's took a pretty significant amount of damage, so really made that kind of the pressure on Dante's own Herald really all for naught, as he took 50% of his health just being caught out by all of these Exalted Bloodletters, and of course both of these cultists being on horseback themselves were able to put some nice bit of damage on them, and a nice full surround off onto these Exalted Bloodletters, all of these Fleshhounds. The Chaos Warriors of Khorne doing some really excellent job there, as the Herald does dive in, using his Locus of Wrath maybe a little bit early to use that for the second time, just considering these Bloodletters were pretty much already on death's door. Probably could have saved that ability for another engagement later on down the line. But Bloodletters engaging with Exalted Bloodletters won't be able to quite win that engagement, especially with some fairly healthy Chaos Warriors with dual weapons to boot as well. Both of the cultists here engaged as well, so this engagement probably should go the way for Dante, with what is kind of sitting around both of these Bloodletters kind of getting really kind of collapsed, at least on two fronts here, as those Exalted Bloodletters should be able to trade very nicely, though we do get a nice charge in from these Fleshhounds, looking to try and get a little bit more additional damage on that front, and kind of take a little peek up to see where things are at on the top. So we do have some Chaos Warriors with dual weapons kind of coming in to assist and try and take that 0.3 back, as the units that were up there for Big B's has kind of been dropped down and brought into the lower fields, and are currently being munched on a bit by those Exalted Bloodletters, who do have a nice little buff to their melee attack with that Horn of Khorne kind of hitting those units, but they are going to be crumbling to just the weight of the numbers from Big B's on that side of things. And the Herald of Khorne once again escaping some little bit of pressure, as both of these cultists have their number out for that Herald, as they again put more pressure on it, forcing him to retreat back into the clutches of his own army. And these guys, that's not necessarily doing all too hot either on the field, with a lot of damage being shoved their way from Dante, who is slightly ahead in damage, but he has no points to his name at this point, and that is kind of a dangerous point to be in, as there is not necessarily easy way for Khorne to kind of put a lot of pressure. He's just kind of hoping that the momentum that he's getting from these engagements is going to be able to carry him through and really put that pressure on all 3 points at once. He should be able to kind of jump in onto this point 3. There's nothing that really coming up on top of these guys, but in the lower point is where Big Bees is putting up a much harder of a fight, as he's really holding Dante back from point 1, really making him slog his way through to take that from him. And he has been able to kind of edge that point different, or the damage differential, pretty evenly, though of course Dante is getting more and more resources back with that kind of comeback mechanic, but he is down almost 4,000 points and he still has not taken any of the points left. He is running out of time. He needs 3 capture points, and he is going to have to just try and push back Big Bees very quickly. He is going to kind of coming in with the Halberds Fleshhounds, trying to just run these guys out of point 1, but these Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne with that plus 40 melee attack from Locust of Wrath and the plus 24 from the Horn of Khorne, really a formidable foe here, and kind of wisely not really trying to engage that just quite yet, as that Revel and Slaughter does kind of finally dissipate and is going to allow these Fleshhounds to do a little bit better. But down goes the Lord for Dante, as Big Bees is able to finally kind of come in with his own and kind of just slowly poke them down, and he does escape once again from the cultist, which did get fairly low himself, and Dante is looking to finally take point 1, though he needs to be able to take point 2, and actually at this point he very easily can. There's not much on the field. Things are starting to stream their way. We have some Bloodletters, we have some Fleshhounds, but most of the units that are going to be sent this way are going to be sent here just to try and get to this point, and not necessarily are going to be units that can necessarily hold it all too long, because it's going to be just a delay battle. And with 500 points left, that is definitely going to be it's going to be doable for Dante to kind of bring those units in and kind of take that point back from Big Bees. But it is going to have to hold all 3 of these points for a very long time, and Big Bees could very well just kind of wait and hold up some of his funds, and then try maybe put a pressure onto this top point. And he is sending these Bloodletters, though of course they are engaged with those Chaos Warriors with dual weapons, so really both sides are going to be getting that bonus versus infantry. And I think the dual weapons here definitely looking like they're going to have that edge and be able to push those Bloodletters back. But Big Bees is still committing a lot more units to the lower points, trying to hold back point 2, but point 2 is going to be falling to Dante with only 300 points away from defeat. He is going to be able to stop that time clock, at least for now, and he is going to be holding these points, as those Fleshhounds though are going to be charging right up the field, looking to get a rear charge against these Chaos Warriors. We have a second one as well, so both of these units going to be quickly hitting the Chaos Warriors as hard as they can, and they should be able to break them, though they do have that Relentless Rage, which does make them unbreakable. That nice army ability holding them back, just really keeping these units tied up for as long as they can. They are going to be expiring and pretty much will be instantly shattering at this point with all of that pressure on all sides, but it did make it so those Bloodletters are going to be off the table. Now these Fleshhounds going to be able to turn around and charge right into those Fleshhounds from Dante, trying to get point 3, and they are slowly capping it bit by bit, and they were actually able to hold off these Fleshhounds by the looks of things from this point, so they're going to be able to cap that a little easier than they were before. Spawn going to be kind of coming in, trying to hold this point. Fleshhound's just going to charge straight on forward. And for now, they are still capping point 3, but when all of these units do kind of come off that point, I don't think they're going to have enough pressure to really cap that quickly enough, and more units are going to be streaming their way. Fleshhounds as well as some more Bloodletters just trying to get onto it, and those Fleshhounds did a massive amount of damage to those Spawn, taking them down to half health, just right off the charge, taking so much damage, and they needed that nice little buff there so they can bring enough units in. The third unit of Fleshhounds Fleshhounds, I should say, at this point, should be able to take point 3 and hold that for at least a little bit. And as soon as they take that, I imagine they are going to try and charge right into the spawn, but they need to be they need that capture point, but they are going to be seeing that the spawn, they're getting a little too close for comfort, but those Furies are able to kind of pull them back, so they will not be getting the charge that they got on the other unit, and those Fleshhounds themselves are going to fall. So Big B's is so very close to taking this top point, but he has been unable to seal the deal. And Dante is now I think he is pretty much won it. This last push kind of failed for Big B's. He still has a few units left, and he needs to get as many as he can. So if he can take point 3, that is all it is going to take. And so with these Exalted Bloodletters, that might be, and it is enough to stop that capture point. With enough weight on this point, Dante has held his ground, and he will be rewarded for that. I do not see anything else going to be able to kind of come in and close the distance. Dante is going to be forcing a game 3. Big B's came so very close, but it is not going to be enough. So let's see how things did fare on both sides. So the Heralds of Khorne kind of played a little bit of a game of chicken on both sides, trying to get that. And yes, Outer Region, the comeback mechanic definitely made that all the more doable for Dante, because otherwise that damage was pretty even. Like the spawn for Dante here did pretty well. 2,000. Nothing got shy of 1,000. I mean, even 1,290 was, I think, the lowest that they had. The Halberds didn't do all too. A couple of them did pretty good. Furies did really well. As for the reserves for Dante, the Exalted Bloodletters did some pretty decent work, and the 2 Cultists did a good job of kind of counteracting the Juggernaut on the Herald for the other side. And then the rest of the units did some pretty good work, so lots of damage overall on both sides. So Big B's, for his own spawn, though, did not do nearly as well as the spawn for Dante. While the infantry was kind of the flip side, where they did pretty decently against Dante's infantry. Then the rest of the units, Bloodletters, nothing too great there, but the Fleshhound blade actually did really well for Big B's. Almost 2,500 on these guys. 1,600, 1,300, and another one almost 1,300. So some pretty good mobility play. They just did not hold point 3. Like, I think at one point they kind of just needed to stay on that point versus getting the charge against the spawn. Because in the end they just were ever so close, just slivers away from taking that point, but it was just not enough. But now the balance has been restored. It is now 1-1 going into our third match, so we'll see what both sides have in store for us. And can set the next map as well, as that is going to be on Death Pass. Dante has taken just a quick step out. He will be returning in just a sec. So for how the picks and bans will work for the final game. So it'll be it should be a pick 3 and ban 1, kind of the traditional pick ban format for the rubber match. So Dante will have his pick of 3. And then it'll be a ban 1 of those 3, and Big B's will pick his faction, followed by Dante from his remaining 2. And as you can see on screen, we can see what each side has available. So both sides have the same faction pool to choose from. We have Cathay, Kislev, Ogres, Slanesh, and Zinch. Most likely we'll be seeing Ogres and Zinch in the faction pool, both very strong factions. Really kind of forcing a ban of probably one of those two. Otherwise, we have Kislev and Slanesh are probably a fair alternative to be added to that pool. Cathay, probably not, unless you want to have kind of some decent fun. I mean, Death Pass, with the map that you've got, you do have quite a bit of open ground, so you can try and bring them in and try and kind of get that range superiority, but still Cathay does struggle a bit with domination. They are just unable to really put enough pressure very quickly. Yeah, for in chat, so yeah, outer region, berserkers instead of letters, blood letters. I think it's not necessarily a question of berserkers over the blood letters, but mostly the berserkers over the halberds. You want blood letters at some point, not necessarily as your main army. They are one of your infantry units that have the cap potential, but they are also much faster than your Chaos Warrior. But they don't hold up against if you're going up against halberd and spawn, they're not going to last all too long and are going to be losing the support that they give to your own spawn. You want to hold that support for as long as you can, and I think the halberds are usually the best option for that. But berserkers can go the other way when you try and win the infantry fight, try and get rid of your opponent's infantry support for their own spawn, but it didn't quite work out quickly enough to really make a difference, because we saw the value difference in the spawn themselves between Bigby's and Dante's. Dante's spawn were getting like 600 plus more damage than Bigby's side. Like, he had all of his spawn were doing very, very well in comparison, and you can just see how the support between the halberds and the berserkers really kind of affected that change. And of course, there's a bunch of other factors that kind of play into it as well. But still, I think that's kind of where a lot of the change, or the difference in the two battles really kind of shook out, even though like Bigby's mobility was much stronger. The Fleshhounds did remarkable work, but they just don't have the cap weight that the rest of the Khorne forces generally do. Oh, so actually... Oh, I didn't realize that the lobby, they had changed. So actually, while we were talking about going into our final game, Bigby's has actually conceded, considering it is not, he is not in the same time zone as the rest of it. It's like 5 a.m. for him, and it was getting a little too late, so he is actually conceded. So it is actually going to be Tim the Wilder versus Dante coming in to this next one. So we'll go to the bracket and kind of update that a little bit. So we have Dante moving on, as Bigby's kind of got a little too late for him. So it will be Dante versus Tim the Wilder. And looks like in terms of placement on between the battles, so it looks like it's kind of resized that a bit, put the scores back to 0. So what that saved us from is probably a third mirror with how the trend was going in that series. But we will be getting right into our best of 5 now, and it is going to be Tim the Wilder now on the left. Yep, if you look at the bracket, even... Yeah, none of the players you played could have changed that. So yeah, we had how many RTK going into it? We had 1, 2... 5 RTK to start with. 3 of them made it to the semis. Let's see if we have any of our picks and bans for our next one. Nothing just yet. And since this is now the best of 5, it is Broken Leg Gully is actually going to be the map to start things off for us. So pretty straightforward map, symmetrical both sides. And both sides have one point that's a little closer to their own deployment zones, so they'll be able to kind of have a little bit more of a solid foothold there. And it is going to be Dante's pick first, since he is top of the bracket. And I know he did step out, so hopefully he should be back here in pretty soon. So I'll just remind him Dante has first pick. Yeah, now we are in the finals for tonight's tournament. Best of 5. I imagine we'll be seeing the trend for having Nurgle in the opening pick pool. This map is probably one of the, again, the better ones for Nurgle. I think like this one and Arnheim are probably some of the best maps for them. Just with close proximity to the capture points, can easily put pressure on 2 with like having significant pressure at 2 at one time, versus really having to try and focus on one point at a time on some of the other maps. So would not be surprised one bit to see Nurgle show its face here, either on one side or the other. Hopefully not both, for all of our sakes. We have gone through that once already this evening. I do not want to be going through that any more than necessary. There's plenty of other interesting and fun matchups for that. So Dante has returned at least to his computer, so we'll be getting our his picks in for the start of this series. Is still the pick 2, as we have seen in the first semifinals. Dante's just thinking a bit on what he wants to go with. So I guess on his last pick 2, he went with Tzeentch and Khorne. Of course, that was his second round pick. Though he's going to be going with Nurgle and Tzeentch here for his first 2. And we'll see what we have in response for Tim the Wilder. So Tzeentch, again, has plenty of room to maneuver as well. You have plenty of good distance to just kind of set up a nice wide array of blue horrors, and that the cliffs do provide a nice bit of support. With it being Broken Leg Gully, you got plenty of side support on that front. Makes it a lot harder for your opponent to really kind of flank around, and if you are facing off against Nurgle, though, you're not going to have to worry too much about any flanking maneuvers. And it looks like Tim the Wilder is going to be responding, though, with Tzeentch himself. So we're either going to be getting a Tzeentch mirror or a Tzeentch Nurgle, and I think it is probably going to be a Tzeentch mirror. Tzeentch against Nurgle is a pretty decent matchup for Tzeentch. They just have all the time in the world to really kind of pluck away at lightly armored targets, really kind of what they love to be firing in against. So Dante hasn't made it official yet, but I am just kind of assuming he's going to be going that route. And the Tzeentch mirror isn't one of the more, I guess, entertaining mirrors, or at least in terms of visual aspect. We get quite the light show when it comes to that mirror. I think we might need to glue Dante to his chair at his computer if he keeps trying to get up and wander off. And yeah, Dante is going to be going with Tzeentch as I kind of expected. So we will be treated to the light show for our first opening match for the final. Tim the Wilder is ready to go right off the bat. Had an army saved and ready by the looks of things. So we did see this mirror from Tim the Wilder's side earlier on in the series when he did face off against Outer Region. A bit more of an open map in terms of overall kind of just mobility on that. But we'll see if he does decide to bring a similar army than he brought for that last matchup. Dante still going through the final selection of his own army. Looks to be about ready to go. So we should be off to the races here in just a second. All right, Dante is set. So let's get on into it. So for both sides, we're going to be seeing Kairos Fate Weaver, and then we're going to have 4 Forsaken apiece. We're seeing 4 blue horrors on Dante's side with a Chaos Knight, and then it is going to be 5 blue horrors and 2 pink horrors on Tim the Wilder's side. So it does look like Tim the Wilder has brought the same army as he did have in the last one. And let's take a quick little peek at what the Lords have. So for, I believe this is for Tim the Wilder's Kairos Fate Weaver, we have Gaze of Fate, Harmonic Convergence, Blue Fire of Tzeentch, as well as Life Leeching, Fires of Change, and Greater Arcane Conduit. So the same as we have seen for that last one. And then for Dante's Inferno Kairos, we have Gaze of Fate, we have the Scroll of Destiny. Going to be trying to really pump those power recharge rates, and then we have Harmonic Convergence, Pendulum, Blue Fire, as well as Life Leeching, Fires of Change, and Greater Arcane Conduit. A little heavier on the kit for Dante, bringing in that Pendulum and that Scroll of Destiny. Not necessarily maybe quite worth it. The Pendulum does do quite a bit more to Forsaken, considering they did lose their magic resistance, but still with the I guess the nerf that the Pendulum got in general, still not going to be as effective as I think the Blue Fire can be when fired right on down the line. He's, I guess, going to try and supplement that for just the increase in the power recharge rate, try and get as much Winds of Magic as quickly as he can to really kind of pump out that magic as fast as he can. as Tim the Wilder is going to be kind of putting some decent forces up towards point 3 as well as towards point 1, while Dante is kind of be doing what he has been doing for a lot of the fight so far, is sending in his entirety of his opening army straight down the center towards that center point and really trying to overwhelm at that point with just superior numbers. And up until this point, it has actually been able to win that engagement over time. It's just a kind of a factor of how quickly that's going to happen. These Chaos Knights do take a nice, nasty little shot as Tim the Wilder does fire in, which I can only imagine would have been a blue fire, doing some decent damage there. Blue fire coming in from the other side, not quite able to break the shield of these Forsaken, as it does get it pretty low though, as they're just going to be slowly kind of willing down on both sides, staying away from one another as the two Kairoses kind of just circle the battlefield, slinging spells left, right, and center. And Tim the Wilder definitely going to be wanting to wait until the rest of his forces can kind of extend their arms and kind of put the pressure on the flanks of this center formation from Dante, because with what he has kind of facing off against them, it is not going to be able to do a whole lot to just this array of power here in terms of numbers. And then down on the ground, it looks like we have Kairos Favorite got probably a little too far ahead of himself, and he has been punished slightly for that. Does drop his shield and takes a nice little bit of chunk from his HP, but it's nothing to fret about just yet. He should be able to kind of pull out, especially with those Chaos Knights kind of coming in to support, should be able to peel those Chaos Furies off, and he's going to be able to take to the sky once again as a blue fire goes right down the line of these Forsaken, doing a nice bit of damage to them. And we do have some support coming in from some Pink Horse, just going to be feeding that center point with all of this superior numbers. And really, Dante has the number support. He could try and use that, because the longer he waits, the more chances that all of these units, they're already pretty much in position, they can just kind of slowly kind of close their fingers around that center point. So I guess at this point, they're kind of looking at what how both sides are arrayed. Probably Dante is wise to kind of just wait it out to allow so he can kind of fall back ever so slightly, use these cliff sides to his advantage, and not get flanked on multiple sides at the same time. He does have those Blue Horse and those Chaos Knights sitting on point 1, but the rest of the army is going to be, again, just kind of waiting things out, taking those spells from Kairos, who is positioned in a very nice spot, going to be able to get those shots right down the line of any of these Forsaken, try and whittle them down bit by bit. And it looks like we have, I think that was... So Harmonic Convergence was actually going down, so that's going to be going off on the Chaos Furies, and it does also hit these, or it did hit those Forsaken, as they do try to charge in and get some decent damage off as the Blue Horse get their own volleys, taking these guys down to half health. And there is that Gaze of Fate that I thought had gone off earlier. That is going to be kind of keeping him as a kind of a stationary target. He does drop him down onto the field as all of these Blue Horse do try and kind of keep away or keep Kairos at bay, as he's going to be kind of slowly kind of popping on back. It looks like the Gaze of Fate went off on these Screamers as well in response. I think would have probably liked to have got it onto Tim the Wilder's Kairos to kind of hold him at bay, while he continues to try and put some pressure on and get some decent damage off, while that Pendulum did go off and kind of did break some of those Forsaken, as they do kind of pull them back. But that does open up a nice little gap in that formation to allow Tim the Wilder to kind of get into the Forsaken, all into the blue and pink horrors, who have kind of gotten themselves a little stuck up in melee here on this side of things, while Tim the Wilder continues to kind of put some pressure and put some shots in on to the flanks. But the Kairos for Dante has been able to escape his predicament and has flown back up into the sky, not taking all too much damage overall in response to that, able to absorb most of that with his shield. He does have that Squall of Destiny pop, getting some more reserves back, so he'll be able to sling some more of that magic coming in. And here is some of that, as a nice Pendulum going to be arcing right through these Forsaken, doing a nice bit of damage there. Nice quick cast on them, able to hit 2 of those units and cause one of them to start crumbling away. If we take a look on to the flanks, Dante has been able to kind of solidify his points at 1, and that flanking pressure that was there earlier has really all completely funneled into these lower fields and has kind of pretty much been kind of pushed back by Dante. These Chaos Knights have done a good job of keeping things away from a lot of his units, and are now starting to put some pressure onto the range units of Tim the Wilder himself. But Tim the Wilder is ever so slightly ahead in total damage, and he does still have, well, I guess it's only 1 point has been taken at this point. Point 3 still lies completely unopposed, so Tim the Wilder just kind of walked right on past that. I don't know if he just kind of forgot to put a unit back there, or just kind of wanted to kind of slow down the points on his side to kind of keep that comeback mechanic from really kind of coming into play too heavily in that late game, and get some nice exchanges as that nice blue fire goes into Dante's Kairos, able to get some decent damage in when his shield is down, and these blue horrors doing some nice shots into those spawn, as they're just going to be able to melt under the pressure of those shots as they do use up the last of their ammunition. Only thing really saving those guys, Harmonic Convergence does go off, try and keep these Chaos Furies at bay, and with the charging units kind of coming in will help them kind of dish things out a little bit better in response, as they do get a counter charge off as they do approach. Dante bringing in some spawn, as well as a lot of the range has kind of been used up for Tim the Wilder, but he is going to be bringing in 2 new blue horrors off on the side, and these 2 pink horrors do have pretty much full ammunition, but they are, for the time being, pretty tied up, as the spawn and the Chaos Knights as well have done a good job of just kind of charging on forward. Actually, this is the spawn for Tim the Wilder, so those Chaos Knights are actually running out of steam there, and a nice little bombardment just kind of dropping down into the mix of things. I think things are kind of slowly shifting a bit towards Tim the Wilder side, as he does get some units up here, as he does try and take that top point, though Dante has been able to wrest control of the center point and point 1 from Tim the Wilder, so he is going to be slowly edging ahead in terms of total points. So he is over about 1,300, 1,400 up in points at this point. Hey, Dante Williams. You're here to see Dante's Inferno fight it out in the finals against Tim the Wilder, so you'll be hearing Dante a lot here, especially with the mirror going on. And Dante's Kairos is a little bit more under pressure as he tries to dive on down to try and avoid that blue fire, as he's just getting slowly whittled down bit by bit. And with how low his health is at this point, he does definitely need to play a lot more conservative with his own Kairos, as Tim the Wilder is pretty much full health with that shield continuing to regen, trying to get whatever shots he can off on it. But a lot of value has been, or a lot of Winds of Magic has been used up by Dante's Kairos, just with all of his kit, just trying to capitalize on that Winds of Magic regen, and a nice little bombardment here. There we go. Mouse slightly disconnected, but I don't know which side that was on. I think that was, I think Tim the Wilder's side, because it did, actually that might have been, I'm not sure whose bombardment that was. Dante does need to be a little bit cautious, though, about overextending his forces, because Tzeentch definitely doesn't have necessarily the speed to really support a quick push in any general direction. I mean, you have some unit like Forsaken definitely don't have like a super slow speed, much better than like Chaos Warriors, for example. And a lot of the mobility, though, for Dante has been pretty beat down, and all of the range support definitely isn't going to be able to keep up with a fast push. And the farther you push into Tzeentch's own territory, the bigger risk you have of just Forsaken and Spawn kind of just jumping in on top with Chaos Furies, as well, as they do kind of come in trying to shut down the range, as the blue horrors actually get some nice flanking shots in, able to take down the shield of these pink horrors, is going to allow Kairos and these Chaos Furies to get some decent damage in, as we get some units kind of pulled on back out, probably some Forsaken that have been been kind of routed off earlier on. But Dante doing a nice bit of pressure push as he forces a response from Tim the Wilder, coming in at this undefended point 3. Even if it is just 1 unit of blue horrors, that is going to pull at least 1 unit back towards him, and there's a lot more funds pulled out of that second point, which is actually going back towards Tim the Wilder here at this stage, though Dante is sitting pretty comfortable in terms of points, sitting almost 2,000 ahead of Tim the Wilder, though of course Tim the Wilder is ahead in damage. So with that just the change in that comeback mechanic, the resources that Tim the Wilder is getting is going to be really kind of hammering home the change in the momentum shift. So Dante just trying to get whatever points he can and just pulling as many units away from that main fight. So he has these Chaos Furies getting pulled in, though he has some of his own mixed in as well. So kind of a bit of a wash in terms of total value pulled in over towards point 3. And he is going to be completely pushed off of point 2 as Tim the Wilder is kind of really surging back in that direction. As a lot of the units that Dante did have in this pocket had been kind of really stretched fairly thin, as Forsaken now coming off on the flank, trying to put some pressure onto the far point 1, because that is another issue though with Tzeentch. She's trying to cap all 3 points, especially with a point so close to the spawn of the opposing side. Point 1 is going to be very hard for Tim the Wilder to take from Dante at this stage. He does have a very strong control at 2. Well, point 3 is still a little bit contested, but he is sending enough units here to really kind of push back whatever Dante had over on that field. But he is going to need to focus his attention now to point 1. Only 1,200 points are left for Dante before he is able to take victory here in terms of points. While on Tim the Wilder side, he is still sitting 3,000 points shy of that. I think he will be very close to being within range. I think he needs to take point 1 at least at one point or another. Doesn't necessarily need to hold it for that long, but I do believe he needs to take it at some point in this fight. He is sitting about 1,500 ahead in terms of damage, and here comes those reinforcements. 2 blue horrors, some spawn, some pink horrors getting caught out a little bit by these Chaos Furies, but a lot of units are all streaming their way towards point 1. Dante has responded a bit with sending some Forsaken towards point 2. Nothing has really been put pressure on that far point, but we have Forsaken and those blue horrors from Tim the Wilder, which should be able to deal with these Forsaken no problem whatsoever. So that pressure on point 1 is really the only thing that Dante is going to be able to try and hold back, and he is just trickling in units at this point, 1 at a time. 2 blue horrors is not going to be a whole lot when faced off against everything that Tim the Wilder is really putting the pressure on with, and I just don't think that Dante can hold it for that long. So he's going to have to try and consolidate himself and try and make a concerted push onto some of these other far points, away from just the mass of Tzeentch forces that are sitting here in the center. Though if we look at the reserves, Tim the Wilder still has some pretty decent reserves, though he has brought in both of those units. So we have some Chaos Furies coming in on the backside. Some nice fast movers here to kind of put that pressure on, hold things at bay. But it does look like he is going to be able to take point 1 back, as Dante is only 600 points away from victory, though I don't actually see a good way for Dante to kind of get a point back at this stage, because of just how overwhelmed he is on the field of battle, with Tim the Wilder just having a very strong presence pretty much on all the points. Point 3 is the only one that's really sitting open, but Tzeentch doesn't have enough units that can quickly get on to that point. Forsaken blue horrors collapsing on this last Forsaken, and more things are just kind of thrown their way. But with Tim the Wilder now firmly in control of every single point, that bleeding has been stopped, and he is now going to be quickly catching up to that final point total, as Dante tries to just kind of fire into this blob, getting some pretty decent value. In the meantime, the Forsaken taken quite a bit of beating, and the spawn as well, but they are closing that distance to those blue horrors, shutting them down, and yeah, seeing the writing on the wall, Dante is going to concede, and Tim the Wilder will take game 1. So let's take a quick look at the after battle report here. So Dante's Kairos didn't do all too great, really took quite a bit of damage, and even with some of those spells was not able to really generate much of his own. Forsaken did some pretty decent work, and then Blue Horrors, of course, they're just going to do so well in this matchup. There's not much I can quickly shut them down. I mean, 1,500 on these guys, 800, 1,000, so lots of good value there. Chaos Knights, not as much, but having some nice, strong, sticky mobile units is very nice for Tzeentch to have in their back pocket. Rest of the units, some spawn kind of coming in. Pink Horrors not doing quite as well as their Blue Horror counterpart, especially with their cost increase. And then as to Tim the Wilder side of things, his Kairos did rather well on 2,600 in total, able to have some nice presence in that late game in terms of melee as well. Forsaken doing some pretty decent work as well, and then all of the Blue Horrors doing as Blue Horrors do, getting a lot of them over 1,000 in total value, and then spawn kind of coming in the later game to kind of sweep things up. So some pretty decent value all around. So now getting into our second game. This one is going to be on the Crossing of the Sea of Claws, one we have seen earlier on in the semis, and it is going to be making its appearance here again. Actually, got to switch to the best of 5. There it is. So Tim the Wilder takes that first one. And Tim the Wilder does have the picks, and he's going to be going with Khorne and Nurgle for his 2 picks. He was initially thinking he was going to try and go Nurgle or Cathay, but with the map, definitely didn't want to be going with Cathay here, and it's going to substitute that out for Khorne. So now we're waiting for Dante to kind of respond. So he is going to be going with Nurgle. So hopefully it is going to be a Khorne Nurgle, not Nurgle again. Let's see what Tim the Wilder decides to torture us with. I think saving Nurgle for a later fight would be pretty decent. Of course, Khorne is strong against a lot of the factions as well. But it is kind of just whatever you're most comfortable with. I know not a whole lot of people go through the mirrors as much. I know Tim the Wilder is probably pretty well versed in every matchup under the sun here so far in Warhammer 3. Oh boy. So you know how the last series where we started off with 2 mirrors and they wanted, and we were worried about a third. Well, looks like we're going to be down for a bit more than that. both Tim the Wilder and Dante have it, the fantastic idea in their eyes that they want to go for a mirror every single round. Yep, you saw what they're saying. So yeah, they want to go for a mirror for each game that they play, which would mean Nurgle mirror here, and then who knows what else after that. All right, thankfully, Tim the Wilder has decided against it. He has gone with Khorne in response. So it is going to be a Nurgle versus Khorne. So it will be saving us from the struggle of going through another Nurgle mirror and another mirror entirely, at least for now. So yeah, it will be Khorne versus Nurgle on this next matchup. We've seen this matchup on one of the earlier semifinals. I think it was in the had it been in the first semifinal, it was on this map as well. This is a map where generally Nurgle will struggle for distance-wise. Both are ready, so we'll get right on into that. Nope, there has actually been no Slaanesh games so far, Warden, so you have not missed any of those. Unfortunately, it's been pretty much Tzeentch, Khorne, and Nurgle in some form of another. So it hasn't been too much outside of that. We haven't even seen Kislev either. No ogres. So it's really been Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch have been the three factions that have been played. So with best of 5, hopefully we're going to be seeing a bit more variety with that, especially now that a lot of those factions are going to be off the table for the next game. But for now, we do have Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne for Tim the Wilder, followed up by 3 Spawn. We do have 1 of the Chaos Warriors of Khorne, and we also have a Herald as well, going to be rolling in on his Juggernaut with the Locust of Wrath as well as the Revel in Slaughter. So going to be pairing those Spawn with just trying to eliminate as many of the support that Nurgle can do and as quickly as they can, and then in the meanwhile try and avoid that Exalted Grand Cleveland. But instead of that, it is going to be Kugath Plaguefather going to be firing away at range. And for his kit, he does have a Virulent Contagion, minus 40 melee defense, and that will spread up to 5 units. So that can do quite a nasty change in the balance in melee with a minus 40 debuff, Stream of Corruption, Fleshy Abundance, and then we have Cloud of Flies, Nurgling Infestation, Slime Trail, and then Arcane Conduit. So for the rest of it, we do have a Cultist as well, with both Warrior Bane and Icon of Eternal Virulence, and we have Plague Bearers mixed in with Spawn for the rest of the lineup, and 1 more Cultist as well with just the Icon of Eternal Virulence. More Spawn coming in for the reinforcements. So this matchup is definitely going to be played where Khorne needs to just try and avoid just going toe-to-toe with Nurgle. So they're going to be really spreading out their formation a lot more, kind of going towards all of those points, while Nurgle is still going to have enough of a presence here to put pressure onto 2 of the points. So they're going to be going to 1 and 2. And in the meanwhile, Kugath Plaguefather is going to be just kind of firing away into those Exalted Bloodletters, doing some pretty decent damage if he's able to just continue to fire away. especially if Khorne is going to be trying to play a more of an evasive tactic, and that is going to be punishing them where otherwise they really wouldn't be able to do that. Some Exalted Plaguebearers coming in as well. Might be electing to kind of go back towards the second point. I think these were initially brought to try and help out point 1, but not a whole lot is being shoved that way for Khorne, and instead they are going to be electing to kind of square off at least a little bit, but they are getting a pretty decent surround, kind of foregoing point 3 entirely and really just trying to get all that pressure in, kind of trying to take advantage of the fact that these Plaguebearers and Spawn are not in a very good position, and they are going to be trying to rotate around and come in to help as the Spawn and those Exalted Bladers get a nice charge right into the flanks of these Plaguebearers. Spawn are from Nurgle are going to be trying to respond in kind and kind of get engaged while everything is just kind of collapsing upon all fronts, trying to quickly deal with this support as quickly as they can. All of these Exalted Bladers really doing a nice job of hitting from multiple different angles, and these Chaos Warriors of Khorne are going to be plugging this gap from those Plague Toads, keeping them from coming in, while those Exalted Plaguebearers should be in range fairly soon. And the fire from Kugath is doing some pretty decent work, and just firing into these blobs of infantry, firing a little high with that one, but otherwise doing some good poke pressure. Nice stream of corruption there, looking to be going through these units, kind of just really trying to chunk down those Exalted Bloodletters as quickly as they can. And here are those summons from those cultists, going to be dropped in behind enemy lines right on top of these Bloodletters, as the units are going to be taking some pretty decent damage from that, as these halberds as well coming into the flanks of these Spawn and are going to be able to really chunk through these guys pretty quickly. And those Plaguebearers though are in a nice spot right now to really get some pretty decent shots in. If we take a look out at what's left, the Nurglings going to be starting to put some pressure on point 3, and we do have these Plaguebearers still on point 1. So Nurgle is looking to be taking all of these points, so it looks like Khorne has the power balance on point 2, even though I know it does say red there. I think that is going to be in Khorne's possession here. And just not quite, as it does drop just before Khorne was able to take it, as it's kind of tiptoeing back and forth there. Khorne definitely would like to cap this point if they can, at least to hold and get something on the board, but it does look like Nurgle is starting to throw enough into the point, though with these Bloodletters that is going to be finally under Khorne's control. All of these cultists going to be trying to harass that Kugath, and with the assistance of the Herald, getting some nice pressure, all three of those getting right on top of them, able to get some decent hits in. If the Herald does have the Horn of Khorne pop, the army ability, but does not seem to have the and there is that Locust of Wrath, so giving that plus 40 melee attack. So these guys are all going to be hitting pretty effectively against Kugath, though he is able to dish it out against that Herald pretty decently himself, getting some pretty decent hits, and he is surrounded by his own infantry, as those Spawn of Khorne would like some of their own support, but unfortunately they are going to have to just try and tie up these Exalted Plaguebearers as best that they can. Bloodletters coming in on the far flank and be trying to get into those Nurglings and get them off of point 3, try and force Nurgle to kind of put a little bit more funds over towards that far side, while they continue to just throw more of the high HP units straight into the meat grinder, as they try and just grind down Khorne on this center point, as Kugath is just tanking through all of this damage, able to just kind of just hold off all of these cultists. He does cast up, it looks like, yeah, it was a nice little breath attack going right through a lot of these Bloodletters, as they just kind of slowly try and whittle things down with the Plaguebearers getting taken out. There is quite a few Khorne units left, but they're all fairly worn down. These Bloodletters are probably pretty much the healthiest unit that Khorne has, so with these Forsaken especially, they should be able to kind of clean up everything else that Khorne has on this flank. And Khorne is really running out of steam on this second point, as there's not a whole lot for them. They do have the Spawn and Halberd combination, but otherwise are overall overwhelmed in terms of numbers, and they are going to start throwing some more things, as we do have those Chaos Warriors with 2 weapons going to be trying to contest those Plaguebearers, with those Plague Toads going to be coming into response to those, and the Bloodletters should be able to catch out these Nurglings as more are sent their way, but they should be able to take point 3 back in due time. On that side, Fleshhounds trying to come in to support, try and prevent a flank a collapse on Khorne's side, as another stream of corruption goes right through these Chaos Warriors with halberds, trying to eliminate that support. And it does look like they, or at least they're terror routed off away from their supporting spawn, so those spawn are going to start to take quite a bit more damage than they would definitely like, but they are kind of rampage right now into this cultist, as Kugath is kind of just getting some shots at point blank range and still sitting very healthy despite being engaged in melee here in close range. So he is just still a very, very tanky character, getting some nice throws in and just kind of eliminating all of the chaff that tries to contest around him. Off onto the top point here, the Chaos Warriors did kind of hold off just a little bit, as they will be charging in to these Plague Bears. Fleshhounds do get the charge off onto the Plague Toads, and they will be trying to hold them at bay, though I think they charge in just a little early, as that's going to allow these Plague Bears to really kind of screen them out and kind of force or allow these Plague Toads to kind of circle around their own unit and then kind of assist in dealing with those Chaos Warriors with halberds on that side. And Nurgle just continues to throw more and more units into the fray as Khorne tries to wear down Nurgle, but Nurgle just has more and more units to keep throwing in. Not enough to really kill these Bloodletters, but it is enough to just hold that point for a very long time. If Nurgle just kind of brings this last unit of Nurglings in, those Bloodletters will take a very long time to take that far point away from Nurgle, and Nurgle has this second point really under wraps at this point in the battle, and there's not enough from Khorne up on that top field. So it looks like Dante is sitting very strong here at this stage, has all 3 points in the battle, and when you're Nurgle, having all 3 is a very strong position to be in. It is just very hard for Nurgle to really kind of concede that, especially when they just consolidate on 1 point completely. This far point does look like it is going to be going Khorne's way eventually. These Chaos Warriors with the Fleshhounds and that Cultist are able to deal with these Plague Bears, and they will be taking point 1 back, and point 3 is actually going back in control of the Nurgle forces, even though these Bloodletters should be able to hold off everything here, and it's going to be forcing another unit of Bloodletters to come in to deal with all of these units. Even that Herald is getting in on that action, because they are just unable to deal with those all of that HP in a fast enough manner to really make a difference, and they are running out of time ever so slightly. Kugath just going to be lobbing some vile things down towards point 1. He's able to get that extra support kind of across the map, so this is going to be where he's going to be shining just a little bit, where he doesn't have to necessarily be on these points to help out. So he has a nice line of sight right into these Chaos Warriors with dual weapons. Spawn and Nurglings and me teaming up together, and they should be able to deal with these Fleshhounds, and might even be able to deal with these Chaos Warriors, especially with these other Spawn coming in and this support at range that Kugath is being able to give. So they actually are slowly taking this point back into their favor, but for the time being, Khorne has been able to take that, and they are finally able to start taking point 3 as well, and they need those points very quickly, because only 1,000 points separates Nurgle from victory at this point, and he's still got 4,000 to go for Khorne, but Khorne is coming in numbers towards point 2. They have Halberd Spawn, and they have Exalted Bloodletters as well, all going to be charging forth, and but unfortunately that is not going to be enough, as Khorne does kind of just realize that they just don't have the time to take all those points, and Nurgle does take that victory, and Dante is now going to be up, or even now, 1-1 going into our next game. So we'll go over the damage real quick here. So for Kugath, he does get 3,700 for him, doing some pretty decent work overall, and then the rest of the units not doing necessarily too much damage in support, though the Spawn did get some nice value in, and Forsaken themselves usually do some pretty good work, though not many of them were required here. It was pretty much just holding all those points. Nurglings actually got quite a bit more value than what you would be seeing on that damage value because of just how many units they had to tie up from Khorne to try and take that far point. They were just able to just hold out for so long, and 2 units of Nurglings will be able to outweigh 1 unit of Bloodletters, and that's kind of really where their strength comes into play in this fight. That is the rundown for their value. So let's go back to our scene, see if we got our next picks underway. That one is going to be on Arnheim for game 3. Then it'll be Battle of Itza, and Death Pass will be the last 2 should we get to them. So now we should start seeing a few factions that we haven't seen up until this point. It's been pretty much the factions that we have seen in these first 2 games, Tzeentch, Khorne, and Nurgle. Hopefully we'll be able to start kind of pulling in a few of the other factions. It'd be nice to see like Slaanesh, Kislev. I mean, even at this point, it'd be nice to see the Ogres kind of come in to kind of mix up the color scheme a little bit from all of the rest of the 3 demon factions, minus Slaanesh, of course. It is Dante's pick. All right, so Dante is going to be going with Khorne and Slaanesh for his 2 picks. And Tim is going to be responding very quickly with Nurgle for his faction pick. So we can add that to his. And they are a fairly decent pick. Well, they're a really good pick against Slaanesh. So unfortunately, I think we are going to be seeing Khorne one more time here, is my guess from Dante. So he can try and go with Slaanesh, though with this map being Arnheim, there's definitely going to be playing to Nurgle's strong suit, and just how much distance that Slaanesh would have to cover to try and put pressure on the far points at the same time, I think would be just a little bit too much for even their speed to really handle. So I'm going to be expecting to see Dante kind of respond here with Khorne. If he takes a look back at the Discord. Okay. Actually, he is going to be going with Slaanesh. So for the first time tonight, we are going to be seeing a 4th faction, which is going to be Slaanesh. So that will be some interesting stuff on that end as they make their grand appearance on the stream. And we'll see how this kind of shakes out, because it's definitely going to... I imagine Nurgle is going to be bringing in like just a lot of spawn, because that is one thing that Slaanesh does struggle a bit against. You have some units that can deal with it, but overall it just the mass and the damage output that they can do, and it's not something that really can get broken very easily. You have to kill them outright, so they are a lot more resilient to all those kind of flanking charges. They will take the damage, but they won't suffer that leadership penalty that otherwise Slaanesh kind of relies on a bit. But Slaanesh is definitely a bit more of a kind of a hit and run faction, so it's just going to be like kind of trying to slowly grind their way through all of the HP that Nurgle has. And especially when you're playing a points game, that is going to, you're on the clock a bit for that, and you can't necessarily rely too much on the late game fun addition that you get with that comeback. But we'll see what both sides have in store for us here momentarily. Still waiting on both sides to kind of finalize their picks. Not a matchup that you see too terribly often, so no surprise that they didn't have something ready to go right off the bat. All right, so Tim is ready, just waiting on Dante to be ready himself. And we'll be getting into our Game 3 match, as we have Tim the Wilder on Nurgle, and Dante will be on Slaanesh. Considering the thumbnail we ended up using for this tournament, it's a good thing we got to see Slaanesh at some point. All right, it looks like Dante pretty much has his army selected. So just waiting for him to hit the ready button and we can get underway. Might actually have to follow through with trying to glue Dante to his computer at this point. There we go. Spam the ready button a few times and he realizes it. All right, let's get on into it. So, Dante is going to be bringing Nakari as well as double Soul Grinder, a couple Marauders, or 3 Marauders, I guess, in total, versus an Exalted Great Unclean One, 2 Cultists, Plague Bearers, a Spawn, as well as some Nurglings as well. So going all in on really the anti-large and just the strong versus single entity, because Nakari doesn't have that bonus versus large, unlike the Exalted Keeper of Secrets, but with both of those soul grinders who do have that anti-large might be able to put a bit of a threat on to that exalted Great Unclean One, who is going to be going up with both of his cultists, who does have the icon of eternal virulence on one and the other as well, and that exalted Great Unclean One comes in with probably his normal kit, so Blight Swarm, Stream of Corruption, Fleshy Abundance, as well as Fetid Stench, Children of Nurgle, Arcane Conduit, and the Pestilent Decay. And then over to Nakari and his forces, who are going to be taking the lower grounds. He does have quite a few items of his own. He has Willing Prey, which is minus 24 melee attack and minus 40 melee defense, which is really kind of the big thing there. Really trying to capitalize on trying to engage with all of those single entities at once and really try and bring down the Exalted Great Unclean One. With Stealer Sword as well, just buffing up his base weapon damage and armor piercing. And then we also have the Lash of Slaanesh, which is just a quick, nice little bit of damage, and Slicing Shards, which will do a nice bit of damage to anything that gets nice and tightly grouped up. We have Soul Siphon as well, Blissful Rapture, and then we have Harvester of Souls for the rest of his kit. So really is kind of going all in with that. Just bring down that Lord as quickly as we can. We'll see if that is going to work out for Dante. That Exalted Great Unclean One is a lot harder to bring to heal than you would expect, even if you do try and commit all in against it. That healing is nothing to slouch at. It has a remarkable amount of resilience, much more than even it's a pretty impressive amount of HP to start with. So we'll see how well that idea is going to flesh out for Slaanesh. We're going to be getting in some of the Plague Drones of Nurgle, the Death's Head. So that is definitely going to be one of the threats to Slaanesh as well, is they don't really have anything that can counteract that other than Chaos Furies. So Nakari is going to be kind of hightailing it back out, going to be wanting to stay away from these Plague Drones, and hopefully Dante did bring in some of the Chaos Furies to at least push these guys back, because that is going to be pretty much free value for these Death's Heads. And these Death's Heads, they do have that armor piercing as well, so even against these Soul Grinders, with that 90 armor, they'll be able to kind of bypass that pretty well on top of all of that. So they're going to be hiding in the forest for now, trying to at least use the trees for whatever cover they can provide from these guys, and they are going to be kind of pulling on back themselves. Looking to just kind of maybe either get some shots in at some more willing targets, or they're just going to be kind of biding their time, waiting until they can get this top point. We do have some Seekers of Slaanesh as well as some Marauders kind of coming in to put a little bit of pressure here, but Nurgle is pretty much all in on point 3, so it's going to be very hard for these guys that are going to be kind of just waiting to try and deal with any of the piecemeal that gets left behind, while Nurgle does eventually push down into point 1, and point 1 is pretty much being kind of kept at bay by these Death's Heads, who are now going to be pushing forward once more to get some shots off on to Nakari and the Soul Grinders, and Slaanesh is going to be trying to dodge these shots as best that they can, just kind of trying to juke what they can, and the Death Heads get their shots off, and so far most of the shots have fallen on the ground. A few did land on the Soul Grinder, but overall at least trying to mitigate whatever damage they can. But these guys don't necessarily turn quite as fast as Nakari, so they do have that kind of window where they're going to be able to get pretty shot up, and these Death Heads are going to get some nice value in the meantime. I don't know if they have enough ammunition to even bring down one of the Soul Grinders, but if they can get it down low enough where it's not necessarily as effective against that Exalted Great Unclean One, that's reducing that threat to it by quite a fair amount, on top of just being able to only kind of engage for a short period of time. So Nurgle does have point 3. And it looks like Slaanesh is going to be taking that far point, and most of these units still just going to be kind of squaring off against one another. Nurgle does leave enough units to kind of hold back anything that would like to engage, and really just kind of keeping everything else nice and close to that Exalted Great Unclean One is going to make it very hard for Slaanesh to kind of dive on top of that blob there with anything that they have. And right now they are kind of getting a nice little just surround, just waiting and trying to buy their time, though these Hellstriders are looking to be a little caught out by these Forsaken, as they do take a little rear charge into them, but these Hellstriders do dive, pull out nice and quick, only losing, I think, one model in total, or just a few. So nothing too bad there. Just a small little lapse with a little free damage to those Forsaken. And they're going to be kind of rearranging themselves, trying to get some charges in, as one of the Soul Grinders had taken 25% health from those Death Heads, but they've used up over half of their ammunition so far, so they're going to have to kind of come in and out quite a few times to be able to generate enough meaningful value and a nice charge in from these Hellstriders as they all kind of collapse upon these Forsaken. Soul Grinders going to be diving in as well, and they are trying to hopefully break these guys as quickly as they can and just eliminate whatever support that they that Nurgle does bring in. The rest of the Forsaken going to be kind of quickly trying to hug up against their Exalted Great Unclean One and just kind of use them as protection. Up on the top, we are getting some engagements as the Seekers of Slaanesh and the other unit are all kind of diving in against those Plague Bearers. They do take that Blight Swarm, so minus 20 melee defense, so they're going to be taking quite a bit of extra damage. These Chaos Furies going to be getting a nice little side flanking charge against these Seekers, and they are taking quite a bit of damage. They're just trying to deal with Nurgle, but these guys need to be cycling in and out, using that charge bonus to their advantage, because these Seekers are taking a ton of damage so far with also these Forsaken and Nurglings. This is kind of a lost cause here, as they don't have enough forces to really get a surround on multiple fronts is really what they need. And there's so many funds tied up here with the Soul Grinder and an Akari on that side, and the other one kind of just chasing things off a little bit on the flank. But now they're kind of bringing more and more to bear as Nurgle pulls back just a little bit, trying to pull in their forces and use these cliff sides to their advantage, preventing Slaanesh from kind of getting an easy flanking maneuver and kind of forcing them that if they want to do that, they're going to have to hit multiple sides. And there's also going to be keeping these guys a little bit more safe as well, because that's going to be making it a lot harder to bring reinforcements up to them. So it's really anything that Slaanesh brings in, it has to go one way or the other without trying to just dive through all of these units. These Seekers do try and charge in, and now in comes the Soul Grinders and Akari as they dive in. Going to be dropping that charge right onto this bomb. That's going to be getting a nice bit of value for Akari there, but everything is in on to the Exalted Lord. He does have the support. Musk can be reducing things. Poisoned as well as that nice amount of damage, but man, oh man, that Soul Grinder, I thought that was damage dealt. I thought that thing had gone down to 0, but it is still taking quite a bit of damage. Though the Exalted Great Unclean One taking about 25 as well. Lash goes down, trying to just eliminate things, and Slaanesh, this is going to be like an all or nothing. A nice rampage there, but not early enough, because the Fleshy Abundance still goes off, so he is going to be healing himself, but that does mean Akari is going to be able to kind of engage more, but he does push a little too far forward, now surrounded by Spawn, and Akari is very much a glass cannon. He does not want to be engaged any longer than he has to. Soul Grinder is going down, the other these Demonettes as well, trying to kind of muck things up, but it looks like the momentum is quickly dissipating. The Exalted Great Unclean One is pretty much back to full health at this point. So Dante did try valiantly to dive in against that Exalted Great Unclean One, but it does not look like it is going to be enough, as there's nothing to show for it at this point. We do drop kind of another piercing charge as they kind of drop right into this blob. Going to be able to get some nice damage, and they're hitting a lot of units. However, that was not the main target of this engagement. They were trying to deal with the Exalted Great Unclean One. That rampage was almost early enough, and that may have actually been a bit more of a difference had that rampage stopped that heal from going off. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and now Nurgle is going to be coming in with more and more support as their momentum is quickly dissipating. Not much left. Akari is sitting very low in terms of HP. He is really just caught up with all of the Spawn. He is trying to get out, but there is just not enough mass to him to get through the Spawn. He is just step by step making his way out, but that cost was monumental, and there's just not enough to show for it. Nurgle definitely coming out very high in that engagement, and still very strong presence here up on top on point 3. Akari going to be trying to get a dive down in on this Beast of Nurgle, who he tries to get isolated with the help of that Soul Grinder, get as much damage in as he can, get some nice hits off, but he himself is very low. Deathhead's going to be diving down. Now, if they don't have any ammunition, that would have been great to have. Just a single volley would have been probably enough to bring down Nakari. The Nakari might very well just go down due to crumbling. He is so very low in terms of leadership. Another hit or two might be enough. Rampage Fascination, so they are going to be able to at least try and pull them out, but they're far enough away from any other units that their aggro continues on to Nakari, but he is able to finally speed his way out of that engagement. Now, the only plus side from this is really a lot of the infantry that was down there has been pretty much dealt with. A lot of the larger units, the Spawn, the Beasts of Nurgle, but really that Exalted Great Unclean One still going strong in the center, as Slaanesh still only has that one far point to their name. Everything else is still going very much Nurgle's way. The Plague Drones come in, take a few massive hits from Nakari as he tries valiantly to stay alive here. To provide as much support as he can, landing some very good hits against those Plague Drones, and they will be brought down, and Nakari will still live to fight things out. He does get a nice little buff to healing from that unit being completely killed off. But Slaanesh is going to have to bring in quite a few units if they're going to be able to mount another big offensive like that. But they do need to kind of start slowly whittling things down, trying to cycle in and out as Nurgle just continues to hold very strong on the top. The Seekers try and continue to break through these units as much as they can, but there's just not enough support. Slaanesh needs to be hitting from multiple angles here to try and get that flanking ability to prop off. And then the center engagement going to be going for round 2 here as Nakari and the Soul Grinder kind of feign a charge on this flank as they were about to kind of go all in on all flanks, but just the Marauders with the spears are going to be kind of sticking around to kind of try and hold that cultist at bay. The rest thinking better and are going to be kind of pulling back, going to be going for either kind of stuck between these Plague Bears, not necessarily wanting to go for them either. And once again, here is that charge on all sides as the Seekers and Nakari with the Soul Grinder are going to be charging in. Lash goes down, trying to get as much damage off as they can onto the Spawn and break things one more try. Once more into the fray as Nakari dives in, probably not going to be leaving this engagement unless he gets a few hits off and pulls on back out. But that Exalted Great Unclean One has his attention on Nakari and is going to try any hit that he can. He has Fleshy Abundance going off Overcast, so everything's going to be healing on up. Nakari does pull out, looking for to try and get another charge in. He gets a quick charge into the Plague Bears, and I think we'll probably try and charge right back in and try and deal what he can. But that Soul Grinder is just kind of stuck in with melee. Nice rear charge in from Nakari, trying to just land what he can, but he's just not able to even get any attacks off there. Kind of a little stuck up, and it gets kind of slapped back the other way. But you can see Nakari is getting some healing off as more and more of the Nurgle forces slowly kind of get taken out. And that healing actually quite nice, though. Kind of going back and forth there as he takes some massive hits from that Exalted Great Unclean One, kind of just kind of taking away all of the healing that he was able to get earlier on. And it does look like Nurgle is sitting very strong here. There is no kind of pulling them off of this point. And Nakari just trying to kind of come in. Now, he has been able to get the Exalted Unclean One up to his healing cap, but still, that is a lot of HP to kind of work through. And after that initial engagement, Nakari has been as cautious as he can be, but at this point, there's just not enough time left, and Nurgle is going to be taking this one. They solidly have control over point 1 and point 2 up on top, and there's no taking either of those points back. No time at all, so that is going to be pretty much it for game 3, as Tim the Wilder is going to be winning with Nurgle here, doing a very nice showing there, kind of showing just kind of why that Exalted Great Unclean One is just such a problem for Slaanesh, and he's able to take down the Soul Grinder as the Soul Grinder tries valiantly until its dying swipe to try and deal with whatever he can, but down it shall go, and with him gone, that is the last threat. And with the time slowly ticking down, only about 170 points left for Nurgle before victory. The end is inevitable. And Slaanesh will fall this round, but not without putting up a valiant show to try and bring down the big Chungus himself. But unfortunately, it was not enough. And Tim the Wilder does now get into match point. Is another win for him. Will win him the tournament. So we'll take a quick little look at the after battle report to see how well Nakari fought. So his total value, he did get 48-47. So that is a ton of value for Nakari. Unfortunately, it was not enough. It was not enough for that Exalted Great Unclean One to be brought down. One of the Soul Grinders did get over 2k. The other only got about just almost 700. Rest of the units, nothing too great there for now for all the support, which had the mobility. The Seekers got to almost 2,300. On these guys, 1,600 and 1,200. So a lot of value was gained from those Seekers. They did do some nice work, but unfortunately, it just was not enough. There was just way too much healing for Nurgle. The Nurgle would not be removed from that point. The Exalted Great Unclean One getting almost 4,800 himself, so it was not quite able, I believe, not quite able to get up to the point total on the Kari, but still, just so much HP to get through. That was really the big problem there for Slaanesh. And then rest of the forces, those Death's Heads, got 2,600 themselves, so that was a ton of value for them. And then the rest of the forces, just so much HP. And that was, that was the big problem. So that is that for that game. Now we're going to be getting into game 4. Looks like Dante may have dropped for just a sec, so he should be back in just a second. Unless he thought it was a best of 3. So the battle is not quite done just yet. Tim the Wilder is going to be going with Ogre Kingdoms and Slaanesh for his next 2 picks. So we might be seeing Slaanesh back to back. Or we'll be seeing Ogres for the first time tonight. And then the map as well, make sure that is updated for them, is going to be on the Battle for Itza. I think that is the first time we have gotten to this map as well for this evening. We'll see. Still no word from where Dante has gone off to. Hopefully he didn't think it was just a best of 3. Finals being best of 5 after all. So he's not out of the fight just yet, but I'm not seeing if he is online or not. Does look like he's at least online, at least on his phone. So hopefully he saw the message. So hopefully it's just a little quick drop to the internet and he'll be right back in. because he didn't. Fully finished out the last game, so it would have either happened like just as the game finished. Because by the time I got back into the regular lobby after looking at all the damage, that he wasn't there, and we'll see if he's able to get back in. Hopefully he can. Okay, so yeah, it looks like he just said internet went out. So hopefully that's only a one-time thing. But yeah, we'll just, in the meantime, we'll just kind of hang out and wait until he returns. I guess while we wait for that, I'll take a quick little peek at what the dogs are up to. They've been left to their own devices for a little while, so that's never a good sign when it's that quiet out. Alright, it at least appears that Dante is back online. I see him in the Discord, so hopefully I'll have the game up and running here in just a second, and then we'll be able to get into our Game 4 series. Says he's in game as well. I'll resend him the code for the lobby, and then hopefully we'll be able to get him right back in. And hopefully he didn't mess up the lobby in the process of getting disconnected. Oh, looks like the lobby did get messed up, so we're going to have to recreate that anyway. Right. We got Tim back in. I was waiting on Dante, and we will be underway after this small delay, getting everything back up and running for Dante. But looks like he should be able to hop on in. Usually, rehosting does kind of fix any issues with trying to connect. Might still be having some issues. Well, for next stream, might need to get a technical difficulty little video to play in the middle of something like this if it happens again. But Dante should be here. He at least acknowledged that I sent him the invite. Well, we'll have to keep investigating this a little bit. So there's a small... So it says he can't... Yeah, we'll try having Tim host instead. Dante's still failing to join. It's possible, kind of, because I know at one point I had an issue where I couldn't create join or any kind of lobby. So hopefully we're not having the same problem with Dante. But right now we're gonna try having Tim host, and we'll try. If this doesn't work, then we might have to try and do this offline at some point and add in the finishing games to the series. But hopefully we can get the last couple of games in. Oops, I think I just joined normally. Back out of that. Yep, yeah, exactly. Like you didn't get DC'd during the match. That would have been unfortunate. Okay. At least able to get into the lobby this time. So we'll see if Dante is also able to get into the lobby. Hey, we got everyone in. Looks like the rest of the series is still a go. All right. So as I guess a recap for this game 4, after a little bit of a delay, timthewilder went with ogres and Slanesh for his 2 factions. We'll see what we have from Dante in response. He's definitely had plenty of time to kind of think about what he wants to go with, but let's see. Actually, okay, so Dante said okay, but he meant Ogre Kingdoms. So it's Ogre Kingdoms and Ogre Kingdoms. I think we need to maybe change that abbreviation for future. So it's actually an Ogre Kingdom mirror, now that I realize what they had typed in. At least that's what I am taking from the chat. So this is the first time we've seen the Ogre Kingdoms today, so it's going to be... We're probably going to be seeing the Iron Blasters. Not that... Even with the ridiculous increase in their cost, they're still a very good unit here against the Ogres, with so many just large, monstrous units to fire in against. They shoot remarkably well against them. You do play them a little differently with... Instead of trying to counter fire other Iron Blasters, you're mostly just trying to generate as much value as you can with them. So firing into Man-Eaters, into Lead Belchers themselves, or if you can get close enough to a large target like the Stonehorn, then Lead Belchers can still do fairly well. But otherwise, we're probably going to be expecting to be seeing fairly wide armies. I've seen them do a lot better than kind of more tight armies that use some more elite units, you could say. Just going wide with Bulls and Noblars and Noblar Trappers tend to do really well. And then throwing in some pretty decent range, like Man-Eaters have enough of a kind of a... They don't melt so ridiculously fast against... just incoming shots from either Lead Belchers or from the Iron Blasters, but they still do take quite a bit of damage. So we'll see what both sides are going to be kind of coming up with. It looks like timthewilder is ready, and since it's going to look a little confusing on once we switch the scene over, they switch sides on us. So technically Dante's going to be on the left side, so I'll switch that over in the next stage so we can get the right idea on who's on what side. We're still waiting on Dante to finish up his army, but then otherwise we'll be getting into this game 4 eventually. Sorry for the long delay. factors outside of our control. We can always blame Dante for having crappy internet. And he is still kind of trying to work through his own army, so no rush to him. Looks like he's pretty much set now, so we should be getting started here in just a hot sec. Dante's trying to make the most of every last bit of funds that he can, by the looks of it. I don't think he's going to get much closer than what he was at. All right, Dante. Well, that's not good, is it? So Tim said he may have he's still in the lobby, at least for now. But I see. Yeah, he's still selecting his army, so we're still there's still an opportunity for him to make it out of this. All right, they're both ready to go. All right, let's roll. It's about time. So, as I mentioned before, Dante is on the left side, so I'm going to just quick swap these around. Just so you guys don't get confused. I have to remember to fix that back eventually. But so yeah, Dante's on the left, so he has a much wider army than what Tim the Wilder is going to be coming in. Tim the Wilder is going to be going in with that double iron blaster Definitely with this map, there's plenty of open fields to kind of utilize that. So you should have some good range. And there's plenty of you can keep those guys nice and far back, nice and close to any support that you want to bring in from any of the deployment zones. But otherwise, for Dante's army, it is going to be a bunch of Noblar trappers. We have ogre bulls with the iron fist, so these guys have a little bit of extra shielding. Otherwise, just plenty of ogres. We have some dual weapons mixed in as well. Slaughtermaster of Beast is going to be coming in with extra ingredients. Pan's impenetrable pelt, as well as the Curse of Andrahair, for a nice little bit of debuffs and buffs for his units. And then we also have just the Blood Cleaver is the other item with Belly Slapper. So otherwise, yeah, just a bunch of ogre bulls for him. I do believe, so yeah, just the regular ogre bulls, so nothing any more expensive than that, just trying to overwhelm with numbers. While on the other side of things, we have a Slaughtermaster of Beasts as well, with the same 2 spells and the same abilities, except it does have Wild Heart in comparison. Otherwise, it is going to be Ogre Bulls for his own units with some Iron Fists. We have a couple of Iron Blasters who are going to be firing off right away, and some Noblar Trappers, and is going to be coming in quickly with the reinforcements, bringing in more of those Noblars, because he didn't really have any to kind of start things off. So he's going to be getting these guys up in front of the rest of his units, while his Iron Blasters are going to be continuing to fire in, though they are going to be kind of coming in below those hills pretty quick here. So that is going to be to Dante's advantage. Just that line of sight is going to be a little bit obstructed, though with how wide that Dante went, they're still going to be able to shoot at some units, maybe not necessarily the units that they want to be firing in right off the bat, but so far those shots have been able to find some good targets and has done quite a bit of damage to these Ogre Bulls with Iron Fist, already taken them down to about half health. So far, just with the initial opening volleys, but Tim the Wilder is just kind of waiting for those reinforcements, and honestly, Dante should really press that advantage. He has an overwhelming amount of field presence, and he could very easily just push into the spawn of Tim the Wilder, because with just how wide he has gone and how many units, he can't really keep all of that at bay. And kind of keep these guys on the back foot, or just maybe kind of just try and utilize this hill as best as you can, because Tim the Wilder is just going to be sitting back and firing for the most part, though those volleys are doing a ton of damage to those Iron Fists, just taking off chunks and chunks of their HP with every single volley, already bringing some of them back by teleporting them out. Just how much damage they initially took, not going to be a whole lot of use after taking all of those volleys, and that hill now is kind of coming into play a bit, as Dante is able to utilize that to his advantage, and the Iron Blaster is going to be kind of sitting just a little too low to be firing in. Honestly, at this point, with how much range they have, you could almost set them up on top of this hill over here and have no real threat to them, because right now those shots are just landing right into the hill, and then he's going to be redirecting that, trying to hit some of the ones in the back line. And this one is actually going to be kind of pushing forward just a little bit to try and get some of all these in. Looking to fire in again on the back line. Actually, this time I think is targeting that Slaughtermaster of Beast there, trying to get some shots off onto him. We do have a slight engagement off on to the far flank, as these Ogre Bulls are going to be engaged with multiple Ogre Bulls with these Trappers as well. Just overwhelming numbers on this flank, though, and that is going to be kind of where Tim the Wilder can be able to excel, because everything kind of got shifted more and more down the line, really trying to use this hill, but now in the meantime has now left this flank to be completely overwhelmed by Tim the Wilder. He's going to be kind of coming in with just vast amounts of superior numbers, and these Trappers need to kind of get into range and get some decent shots off, because right now we do have the Curse of Andrahair going off, so that's going to be reducing the melee defense and the melee attack by quite a bit for this little engagement. Though I think if it could have gotten enough range, this would have been a nice juicy target, though those Ogre Bulls quickly being routed off, so may not have been all too beneficial. But the nice charge in by these Ogre Bulls into the Noblar Trappers, quickly getting some nice hits off onto them, and might even be able to just kind of outright break these guys, still sitting with quite a bit of HP. But the rest of Dante's units quickly putting that pressure on, kind of doing what they probably should have done a little bit earlier, is just kind of going on the offensive here, utilizing their numbers on this flank, and are quickly breaking down this left flank for for Tim the Wilder, but Tim the Wilder's shots from these Iron Blasters are still just wrecking havoc, and especially if they can get some shots off onto this pocket right over here, that is going to be a ton of value generated, just considering how tightly packed these guys all are, and that might be exactly where that Iron Blaster is kind of lining up its next shots. We're going to be getting some buffs in. Looks like that is going to be going down on Tim the Wilder side, giving that melee defense physical resist buff. So these guys are going to have that nice staying power here, and just reducing the armor in return with that sundered armor, I think, from that Iron Blaster. So doing some nice, good work on that side, but really it is pretty much just a land battle. There's just some units being kind of committed to the top, but right now that is going to be Dante has all three, well, two of the points. The third point these Sabertoss packs do kind of come off of before they were able to kind of finish the job. But Tim the Wilder so far trading better in terms of damage value, but he is getting that pressure is beginning to mount up on that hill, kind of forcing these Iron Blasters back into a position where they're not going to be able to really get any shots off onto anything of note. They're going to have to kind of reposition themselves up onto this hill if they're going to be able to get some hits off onto all of these ogres in the center. But the Symboli's trying to catch out that Slaughtermaster, who took a little bit of damage early on, but he's going to be just kind of keeping away from anything that can kind of do him harm, at least for now, while the other Slaughtermaster is waiting in to melee, just kind of doing some decent work in there, just kind of providing those buffs and debuffs so that the Curse of Honor here does go off, given that minus 24 melee attack, and just reducing the rest of the effectiveness of that engagement for the Dante side of things. So far, the damage differential has pretty much stayed fairly even, and that can quickly shift either way, depending on how well this flank kind of goes for Dante. He does have the superior numbers here, but he always has to be mindful of getting so close to these reinforcement points that just like can quickly have these like Sabertoss packs dive on top, and that just any unit in general can at close range can really devastate any attempt at that. And we do have units returning for Tim the Wilder, as well as he does have those Nobbler Trappers, going to be able to kind of counterattack on that far flank, and things are kind of running out of steam just a little bit, I think, for Dante. The center rank is really kind of just going just ogres against ogres. You can kind of see where the lines are drawn here, with Tim kind of slowly kind of pushing in a nice tightly packed unit over here, but that kind of does mean that this far flank is going to be more in Dante's advantage, and if he can put some pressure onto that Iron Blaster, at least keep it from firing. But right now the Iron Blaster is just kind of pointed off in the distance. It might be trying to kind of get out of that tree line a little bit and just kind of fire shots right down the line, because that is going to be where some nice value is. And a nice volley there, able to go into the dual weapons and those regular ogre bulls, and the other one is kind of firing in at some of the reinforcement, particularly these lead belchers are going to be a key target to kind of deal with, as Dante has brought these guys in as those Iron Blasters were kind of tied up and kind of stuck in an odd position. They're trying to capitalize on that, but they are getting very close, and they are taking some massive amounts of damage now that the Iron Blaster has kind of retargeted against them, and those volleys are quickly taking them down. Iron Guts as well kind of coming in, so these guys are the more elite units. These guys have that armor piercing, not the bonus versus large as the Iron Guts with great weapons, but they are going to be kind of coming in now a lot more of a sticky unit that kind of capitalized. They are going against man-eaters with great weapons on the other hand, and these guys have that bonus versus large, so they're going to be trading pretty nicely into those Iron Guts. And they don't have that much armor anyway, so that armor piercing from those Iron Guts isn't going to be as cost effective. So those man-eaters should have a nice field day against those other elite units on that front. But the problem still remains is those point totals, because this is a domination fight after all, and Dante still has every single point in his possession, even though he is down by a lot of points right now. He's about down by 4,500. So the offensive really needs to be pushed heavily by Tim the Wilder at this point. He needs to get on to these points very, very quickly. He is down to only 1,300 in terms of total points left, and he is now slowly pushed into point 1, but he needs pressure on everything right now. And the problem is he has a lot of funds tied up into these two Iron Blasters. They've done quite a bit of work, but they are not going to be capping points for him anytime soon, and he is going to be trying to send some Ogre Bulls this direction, but everything is really kind of tied up. These Nobbler Trappers are able to get some shot on these Rampaging Saber-Tusk pack, and there is still an Ogre Bolt with dual weapons sitting here with some more Nobbler Trappers who are pretty beat down, but they have been able to kind of get some pressure on the point 1, but is still not looking like it is going to be enough. A more dedicated approach is being put onto point 2 as these Nobblers are all kind of charging in, and they need to push back these Trappers, but the Trappers are put in a very nice position right on the edge of the point, starting to slowly take that point back, but only 600 points to go, and all 3 points are still in Dante's possession right now. So despite the fact that he is down pretty mightily in terms of total damage, he has pretty much won the day by just keeping those points. Point 1 does fall to Tim the Wilder, giving himself a little bit of more time, but he is not capping point 2 fast enough, and that I think is going to be all she wrote. Is I think Dante is going to be able to win this fight and is going to be able to bring that series even at 2-2. So things were definitely looking a little shaky if you just kept looking at just the field in general. It was looking very shaky for Dante, but Tim the Wilder just waited too long, and there's often a problem with ogres, even in the ogre mirror, that if you sit back too far with those like iron blasters, you might be trading very, very well, but it is domination in the end of the day, and that is going to be what cost him the victory, and Dante will even the series 2-2. So it is actually that side. So yeah, 2-2 now. So take a look at Dante's side of things. So Dante, like most of his Ogre Bulls, aren't going to be really generating all too much value. They really got shot to pieces, but they just pushed so far into Tim's side of the battle that it didn't really matter at the end of the day. He had some other units like those Mornpain Cavalry up in those Lead Belchers, but essentially nothing. Even the Man-Eaters didn't do a whole lot. But just looking at everything else that is on the field, like nothing really got that much value, but that wasn't really kind of how that the end of the day was. It was just a landslide in terms of points. Lead Belchers did very well, and a lot of these units are going to have very decent damage in terms of the trade on Tim the Wilder's side. Like the Man-Eaters with great weapons got 1800 themselves, so a ton of value on their side. Usually the Nobbler Trappers can generate some pretty good value, but it doesn't look like they got too much here. Dante did a pretty good job of kind of pushing things back, but yeah, that is going to be forcing a final game 5, as it is going to be a pick 3, and well, there isn't really much of an option for these pick 3. There's only 3 factions left. Yep. Yeah, William is definitely, the 2 blasters greater than 1. If you bring 1, it's not really too worth it. Though if you bring 0, it's just like you sunk so many funds into that iron blaster, you can't adequately like put pressure, even though you're trading very, very well. In a land battle, that would have been excellent, but not in a domination where it's just like you need to have that field presence, and you just lost that when you put, it's, yeah, 1700 a piece now. Yeah, Beastcaster is probably one of the, like, because you can either bring that or you can bring the lore of the mob, which can give you the healing. There's not necessarily a whole lot because it's still expensive, and like the I think it's the Bone Crusher is really good against tightly packed infantry, and ogres just don't have that. So having the buffs from the lore of Beast and the debuffs, I think is really a good way to go, especially now that Scrag doesn't have as much use with the Gorgers not being nearly as strong as they were on initial release. So yeah, I believe it is pick 3 for best of 5s. Yep, use the pick 3. So it's pretty much just a ban. So it's which faction does Dante want to ban? So with what Tim can use, he can use Catholic, Kislev, or Slanesh. And I think the way to probably go with that, because Dante will have Cathay, Kislev, and Khorne. Khorne is a very strong faction to have at this stage and might very well be the one that gets banned. So probably expect that Kislev or Cathay will be the one you're playing. I mean, you could just ban Slaanesh and pretty much have a good choice either way. Though I think Kislev might be the better faction to ban in terms of, because you still have Khorne. I think Kislev still does pretty good into Slaanesh. So yeah, Dante will be banning Slaanesh though. So it is going to be for Tim the Wilder. He has Cathay and Kislev to kind of choose from. And then he does get to ban one of Dante's remaining 3 factions, which we can see on the screen right now, and what he has to choose from. So Tim just kind of trying to figure out what he wants to do. I think Kislev is probably the way to go. Just in general, Kislev will probably have a pretty good pick here. Yeah, the line of sight on man-eater pistols, it depends on the map quite a bit. And it's like with it's a map, you do have kind of the rolling hills on that one side, which did kind of be a little issue for the Iron Blasters as they were. I think that you can probably, if you position themselves up on that top hill, I think you can still probably get some pretty good line of sight with them. But yeah, that's one of the, it's like short range, and yeah, any kind of rolling hills does kind of pose a bit of an issue on that. So now we're waiting on Tim to make his pick. Yeah, it's like if you do want to bring lead belchers in the Ogre Mirror, it's pretty much going to be like something you have in your reserves, something you don't want to start with because of how little effect they'll have against an army that has lead belchers, considering of how much they outrange. And yeah, lead belchers, if they can fire all game, they generate really good value, but they need to do that. So I think Dante pretty much expects that he's going to, well, actually, I think Tim may be thinking he's playing Kislev. It might be Kislev Mirror, but they haven't said anything. I'm going to take a look at it, see if they're building armies. Kind of building armies. It might be a Kislev Mirror to wrap things up. It kind of looks that way. They just never said it in chat. So yes, I do believe that is the case. So that's what we're going to say for now until told otherwise. So that means It is now Kislev Mirror going into the final. I don't know what Tim ended up banning, but I imagine it would have been Khorne. Khorne probably would have been the strongest, was the strongest faction left, and leaving Cathay and Kislev kind of lends to that. Well, Leadbelcher's logic aren't necessarily better for the mirror. It's Leadbelchers are good if there's no iron blasters. Is kind of what it comes down to. So it's that whole roulette of, did they bring iron blasters? How many did they bring? Can I bring in Leadbelchers for that? I appreciate everyone for sticking around as late as it ended up being. This has definitely been one of the longer ones with a few unforeseen delays. Definitely already 11 here. It'd be 1 a.m. for anyone on... No, other way around. So it's midnight for those on the East Coast, so getting a little late for some, I imagine. And I'd be damn surprised if there's anyone from any farther away. So yeah, and then I guess now we're still going on the Ogre mirror, but with the Kislev mirror that's coming up for the final. Not really sure how that one is going to actually end up kind of shaking out. But so on Sabertusks, like they have their use. They definitely have their use because it'd be really nice if they did have Vanguard, and I think they probably should. But for like a 500, they're a fast-moving unit. It's much more affordable than any of the cavalry units that the ogres have, and they still do really well against like lightly armored stuff. They do have the rampage issue, which is why I think they can have that Vanguard and then still have the same cost. But having the something that's that price point really fills a niche spot for the ogres. It's just really good harass for any range units that you don't really care if it gets shot up a lot, especially when if you're in the ogre mirror, like the ogres have a really good you don't want to bring heavy cavalry in the ogre mirror because it'll get shot to pieces, take a bunch of damage from either iron blasters, man-eater pistols, or really a lot of the other, even just ogre units in general will do a lot of damage to the cavalry. So it's just really good unit for that point. Like if you look at it in a vacuum, however, the Sabertusks don't necessarily compare to other things kind of at that price point. Like Chaos Warhounds are 400. They don't have that rampage issue, but they're not quite as good in melee. But yeah, I think overall Sabertusks are still pretty decent. Alright, just still waiting on everyone to finish up their picks for the Kislev final mirror. Probably a fairly wide lineup on both sides. Chariots probably still have a good use here. I mean, because you're going to be probably facing a fair amount of infantry, either in armored or just regular Kossars in general, just to kind of provide that volume of fire. Yeah, this is also, I think, the first time we've seen Kislev as well today. You see him twice in the last match of the day. I don't know about Streltsy necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I don't see them enough. They definitely can provide quite a bit of a punch. I think you probably generally see them mostly when you're playing more chariot play as Kislev, because they're really good deterrents against things trying to put pressure on your chariots, trying to catch them out. If you kind of keep them relatively close. And then like some faction that you really kind of want to have that armor piercing against, but they're still really expensive units and they're not all too mobile. I think that's kind of where one of the reasons why you see a lot less of them, and you already have so many range units as Kislev already, you almost always end up hitting the unit cap for ranged units. Just because everything has a range, like your armored Kossars, your regular Kossars, you have the war sleds, they all have that range attack, so you usually fill that number before then. That's probably the main reason why you don't, is you want to bring as much as you can. And all right, well, Tim is set with his army. Just waiting on Dante, and Dante is also ready as I speak. Yeah, armored Kossars have like just enough ammunition where they can count as range, but it's still not usually all that impactful. But you would see, I don't know how much it would actually change builds now that I think about it. You probably would maybe see like an extra Streltsy or something like that. But I mean, armored Kossars are so common in this matchup anyway. It'd almost be interesting if you could have the armored Kossars without a ranged attack. I think that like a slightly lower cost, I think, would go pretty decently well. But anyways, we are in the matchup. So we have Dante's Inferno is on the left side here. So he is the blue. So he does have some Sargard mixed in. These guys going to be having that armor piercing bonus versus infantry, help to kind of cut through all of the armored Kossars. They will be rather susceptible to any ranged attack, but there is going to be 2 of those hitting in the trees. Otherwise, it is armored Kossars for that front line with a couple of heavy war sleds with an Ice Witch of Tempest to support has the Guardian Call for the summon of the Snow Leopard, and the Hailstorm as well, Bombardment, just to kind of strike in a small little area, just do a little bit of spell casting, not a whole lot of useful spells here. On the other side of things, we are going to be seeing some Asar Guard with great weapons as well. On that side, only one of them by the looks of it. Otherwise, we have armored Corsairs mixed in with some Corsairs with spears and some regular Corsairs to kind of just fill in that back line. So a little lighter on the front. We do also have a little Grom going to be firing away at range, help kind of sit back, relax, kind of fire away. We do have a Patriarch coming in on foot with Celiac's Lullaby, as well as Tor's Battle Hymn, and then we have an Ice Witch of Ice this time around with Ice Maiden's Kiss and Ice Sheet to kind of slow down that speed and charge speed. And I think I like the lore of Ice here better than the Tempest. Having that speed reduction just in and of itself is probably one of the better ones, and you can also bring in the Massive Frost spell, just because you're often going to be trying to kind of, or at least if you're playing against chariots, it does kind of really help to kind of deter them, slow things down, and do a nice bit of damage overall. We are going to be seeing a Patriarch coming in on, looks like horseback, coming in for Dante on his side with Celiac's Lullaby and Tor's Battle Hymn. So both sides are going to be having those buffs. Really, those are probably more used than any of the spell casting for Kislev is the Patriarch's buffs that they get. Essentially is it's like the runes of the dwarf forces, where it's going to be pretty much that same general idea, or like the for the Empire as well. Little Grumps continue to fire away, not doing a whole lot of noticeable damage so far, just a few shots kind of pinging off the sides of those war sleds and a little bit into the Sar Guard, but overall nothing too notable for the initial volleys. Shots kind of raining into the light war sleds of Tim the Wilder, and so far has been able to kind of avoid those incoming shots pretty well so far, as Dante just kind of does a slow push forward, getting in some shots with those heavy war sleds, kind of plucking away at anything that does get within a range of them, while those light war sleds really don't want to get engaged with that Little Grom trying to get some shots off, but these heavy war sleds able to kind of keep on the move, as Dante's doing a really good job of making sure that they stay well and good mobile, so they're not going to be any sitting ducks against any of the ranged that Tim the Wilder is going to be bringing. He's going to be bringing in a Snow Leopard, though he actually already has another one on the field, so that's 2 Snow Leopards for him. Going to be just trying to use their anti-large or high speed, and we are going to be getting a nice little breath right down the line, hitting those armored Corsairs. Going to be slowing them down a bit as well, as they just kind of slowly take some additional shots, and these guys are just going to be pretty much trying to tank it for the most part, using their shields to just kind of block all of that incoming fire on that end, and keeping a very nice straight line across the board, holding things from trying to sneak past and just kind of forcing off an initial shot. We do have Sargard on the very far side, actually. The rather elite unit to be so far from the main battle line. Almost would be worth it to be sending a few units off that distance. We do get that ice sheet, can be reducing the speed and charge speed, as Dante does try and push up with his units, but things are just going to be slowed down quite a bit, allowing for all of these Corsairs and those armored Corsairs to get some very nice shots off, and they are doing a nice bit of damage to those heavy war sleds. Celiac's Lullaby does go off, healing them up a little bit, but they are going to be charging into this very tightly packed formation on the far side, not getting a very far through that unit as they do try and push through. Plenty of infantry, and that Patriarch is going to be kind of coming in to try and kind of just help kind of get them out of there. Does pop the Tor's Battle Hymn, increasing their melee attack, and in the meanwhile the light war sleds do charge in of their own, but they are going to be caught out by these heavy war sleds coming in. Both of the Snow Leopards do try and kind of just deviate their attack, actually able to proc the army ability for one of the heavy war sleds, able to use that Unbreakable nice and early, so that is a nice little catch out for them, while the other light war sleds just continue to kind of rain through both lines line. Pretty much haven't had any direct engagements for the most part. These Sarguard are quickly dealing with those armored Kossars. One of the other Sarguard is kind of off in the distance, going to be trying to hit away at the light war sled as it does kind of try and charge through it, and getting a nice rear charge off against those Kossars. And as soon as that Unbreakable wears off, they will be probably just breaking from the field outright. And Tim the Wilder has had a very good trade-off so far in this fight, bringing in some more light war sleds. He is sitting nicely at almost 3k ahead of Dante at this point, and with so early in the game, that is a very big difference. With only, it looks like we have, they both chose the same points, but Dante should have 2 points here, and Tim the Wilder only has the 1. I should have told them to change their colors, but that's all right. Can't change that now. But so far, yeah, Tim the Wilder doing very well on those initial trades. I'm getting some nice shots in, and a nice blob up here. This would be an excellent opportunity for the Ice Witch to get a nice little breath attack through there. But instead, we do have an ice sheet going down to be kind of holding them in place for as long as they can, allowing those snow leopards to really do some pretty decent work so far, getting some hits off against these heavy war sleds. Really able to break one of them and just kind of harass the rest right off the field. And as well as that Patriarch, going to be utilizing that bonus versus large against him as well, keeping him away and trying to prevent him from buffing up the rest of the forces here. Sarguard going to be kind of holding things back as the Sarguard from Tim the Wilder takes a mighty barrage from the Lore of Tempest. And these Wing Lancers from Dante are going to be taking that opportunity to thread right through the needle and charge into these Kossars, able to kind of hopefully take them out of the picture, and they should be able to at least break them down a little bit. They do have armored Kossars kind of coming in to try and sandwich those Wing Lancers in. But in the meantime, the battle lines, kind of as you see them, a lot more red on the field than there is blue. And the stuff that is blue is already sitting pretty dangerously low. Heavy war sleds kind of being routed off the field, as well as the Sarguard. So things looking very strong for Tim the Wilder here at this fight. But we're going to be getting another barrage looking to be dropping down onto these Sarguard. And these are some very nice uses of that spell on some very expensive units, able to try and just kind of wear them down as best they can, because right now it is just going up against regular Sarguard. So they are going to be able to kind of take incoming fire, but against the great weapons, they are not going to be trading very well at all in that matchup. Now we have both of these snow leopards going to be kind of duking it out at the same time. So Tim the Wilders is going to be able to kind of get the upper hand of that engagement. Going to be allowing his own light war sled, single light war sled, that is all that is left of him. Going to be able to kind of continue to get a few shots off and kind of continue cycling in and out of this engagement through some rather expensive units of both of these Sarguard. Definitely hurting quite a bit in that engagement. And kind of take a look at the greater battle as a whole, as we have some of these Houseplant dervishes going to be looking to try and take that far point away from Dante, who does still have 2 points here, as he has 1 and 3, while only Tim the Wilder has point number 2. Those Sarguard with great weapons with that Ice Witch support should be able to hold what is being sent. Well, actually, that is some Sarguard with great weapons, and in the tree line, we also have a Patriarch as well. So that'll be a rather interesting matchup on that side. It might not be decided all too early, as we have another Snow Leopard duel going off in the plains kind of behind. We do have another support from Dante, so plenty of Snow Leopards on both sides. Nice to be seeing plenty of them, as we have another Snow Leopard for Tim the Wilder here sitting on the center ranks, as now they're kind of shifting a little bit more towards their own right flank, kind of drawing attention of these Houseplant dervishes, and they do want to kind of put that pressure off on the far side, as we have Houseplant dervishes coming in against the other Houseplant dervishes, and they will be having the benefit of the charge here, as they're kind of stuck in melee with the rest. So they are going to be able to probably delay and actually probably end up winning this engagement without any support, though we do have those It looks like some more Corsairs and some maybe armored Corsairs. So 2 units of just regular Corsairs coming in to try and get rid of the Winged Lancers and Coastfight Dervishes. So definitely out classing these Coastfight Dervishes here, even with that chariot kind of coming in to support. Definitely going to be drawing more funds away from that center engagement, kind of allowing Dante to get maybe a little bit of a breathing room as he is kind of slowly working his way back with both of these Corsairs here. These armored Corsairs would probably like to be kind of pushing up a little bit, kind of stopping that loss of that point. Definitely does not want to be losing this point here. Already lost the last game due to just kind of sitting back a little too long. And he is going to be charging in, dropping that ice sheet once again to reduce the speed, making sure these units aren't going to really have any opportunity to really escape, and kind of slowing down these snow leopards as well from kind of coming back into support against the Ice Witch and his own snow leopard. So he should be able to kind of push these guys back, but even that balance on that point is kind of balancing on a thin edge. And then on the far side here, it looks like Tim the Wilder is able to reign supreme against the Sarguard of Dante's Inferno, so he will now be putting a little bit of pressure onto point 1, but we still have the Ice Witch, and we do have a unit of armored Corsairs who are nice and healthy, and against a very beat down unit of Sarguard should be able to hold that point against them. So now the clock is ticking a bit for Tim the Wilder, as he definitely needs to kind of deal with, he needs to hold point 2, and Dante is putting quite a bit of pressure onto there. Those Sarguard Snow Leopards are really being a thorn in his side on that front, and he continues to have to stream more and more units over to point 3, and it is still not quite enough. These Coastfight Dervishes are still holding on, though I think he can probably draw a couple units back towards that center point, though he does have to deal with some more Coastars on that far side that are coming in to assist. So they're continuing to try and force Tim to go in multiple different directions. So we'll see how well or really kind of how those points are going to kind of shake out as we get closer and closer to the end. And will Dante be able to kind of hold on till the bitter end, because he is going to be sitting at a disadvantage in terms of field presence from pretty much this point forward. He's losing out on that damage, and that comeback mechanic for Tim the Wilder is going to be helping him out more and more so. Sarguard trying to get onto the point. We do have some more support coming in, but it is not going to be enough to really deter that. There's nothing close by, so they're going to have to start sending more units from point 2 over. We have in the field some light war sleds coming in, some Coastfight Dervishes coming in, and that might be enough to kind of clear things out. And that Snow Leopard, if they're able to get rid of that Ice Witch, would be a very nice gain for Tim the Wilder, but less than 1,000 points to go, and we still have just the 1 point. Yeah, it is just the 1 point now for Dante. He has point 1 and is only holding it by just a few units, as he is now starting to lose that, as all of these Kosovo dervishes can be sliding in and they are going to be taken, and there's nothing close by for Dante that is going to be able to, I think, stop that cap from happening. He is going to be able to put some pressure on with these armored Corsairs and winged Lancers. I don't know if it'll be there in time to hold these Kosovo dervishes back from capping that point, as they have a nice surround on these armored Corsairs on the ground and really kind of pushing forward and getting a nice charge into those winged Lancers, stopping them from getting their own and preventing them from getting on the point, as that does fall to Tim the Wilder at this stage in the fight. So he now has all 3 points, and those are the ones he needs. Not enough, I think, pressure on this second point for Dante to really kind of take that back. But on the far side, we are seeing a little bit of a shift as the Cossars are spears, but they are engaging with other Cossars kind of in a ranged duel, especially with these light war sleds kind of coming in. I don't think that these guys are going to be able to take that point back, even if they are slightly taking it now. We do have a Snow Leopard sitting in the tree line. Might be enough, but yeah, at this point, there needs to have a few more units than that being put to put some pressure on those points for Dante. And at this point, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at the field, and this is kind of where that momentum shift from Tim the Wilder has, I think, kind of approached that point of no return against Dante, where he was almost able to hold out long enough, but unfortunately with 700 points to go, there's just not enough pressure being put across the board. We have some more reinforcements, these Cossars, another little Grom. I don't know if that's actually a good decision on Tim the Wilder's side. Now, kind of going on that little ground. That's a lot of funds to put into a unit that when you need to hold all 3 points. But nonetheless, Tim the Wilder is going to emerge victorious here. In this fight. The trade-offs in the early stages really came to nest in that late stage. The Little Grom not really getting all that much value, only 1,000 from him. The Ice Witch, reducing the speed was really nice on there. As for the Ice Witch on the other side, 1,400 with the bombardments, so some pretty decent value overall. You're not really investing too much in them anyway. Rest of the units, all of the Cossars and the Armored Cossars, actually the regular Cossars seem to do a lot better in the trade-offs here. If you look at the Armored Cossars in general, one unit did pretty well, though the rest of the units not really doing all too well. One of the heavy war sleds did pretty decently. As for Tim the Wilder's reserves, both of his light war sleds, though, remarkably better than the heavy war sleds. Looks like we had one of them drop out, so we might be able to see, I can still see the values. So Snow Leopards in particular did exceptionally well. I think pretty much on both sides. If we look at Dante's reserves, he had 3 in there. I'm doing some pretty decent work, and they're fairly cheap as well. Cheap single entities, nice to have. And then the Zargard with great weapons did pretty well. One of them did really well on Tim the Wilder side. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much all we have for tonight. I know it was quite a bit longer than what we usually do for being just semifinals and the rest. But yeah, thank you guys all for joining a full 4-hour stream for just that. But glad you guys were able to kind of stick through that. And we had some very fun games nonetheless. So we'll switch back to the final one. We'll update the scorecard, as it was Tim the Wilder that won that after we had a little switch in the position. So he wins with a 3-2 final series and the final bracket as well. He does advance to the final, or advance as the winner of the final. So again, yeah, thank you guys all for joining me this evening. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, or all the videos, all the games. And yeah, I think we're going to close things out, unless there's anything else going to pop up in the last few seconds. But otherwise, yeah, thank you guys for joining. And as always,